Ooh, sounds
Good to
different.
see you.
Yeah.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the school committee of March 16th, 2022. If you could please join us for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So just a couple things before we get into public comments. One is, as some of you know, the girls basketball team is in the Final Four playing the top seed Norwood tonight. So I think Jeff will keep us up to speed with updates on the game. And we obviously wish them all well tonight. And then I think George had just asked us to take a couple things out of order because there are a couple folks waiting on some field trip requests. So if the committee is so inclined, there's two of them. The first one is the grade 8 New York, Philadelphia trip in your packets.
Motion to accept?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Unanimous. And the second one is the New York City for the Business Department National Business Honor Society.
Motion to accept with our best wishes for them?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Unanimous. Public comments, we can do that now, we can do that later, but if anyone has any public comment now, we'll open that up. I'm sure there'll be opportunities as we get through the budget conversation. If folks are here, we can do it then, so that's fine. Everyone's good for now? Great. All right, then we'll turn it right over to the superintendent.
Great, thank you so much. So, number one, I just have some personnel updates. It's with mixed emotion that I'm sharing this with you. We have a couple of resignations and a retirement. We all know the retirement of Ernie Sandlin. Ernie will be retiring the second or third week of July, but his contract really extends until August. So I'm working with Ernie on his contract, but he is retiring. And Steve Burke in technology has put in his resignation as well. He's moving on to different things. With that movement, excuse me, I'll add one more. Lauren Matheson, the Director of Student Services, has taken a position to be more with her family. She accepted a part-time positions at Pilgrim Area Collaborative. So Mr. Boyce, you stole her from me. We will be looking to really look at our special education student services area. One of the things Lauren had told me is that the position she took in 2018 is not what she sees now. It has grown with student services, with ELs, with homeless, with a lot of stuff outside of special education. So my recommendation, I'm going to be looking for a director of special education, which we need to have by law, and then really kind of seeing how internally we can disseminate some of those things to people in central office, into the district at no cost to the budget, to make sure our students have what they need, but I'm not overwhelming the person in central office. So I wish Lauren well. It's good for her. Steve as well. And with the resignation of Steve, George and I spoke a little bit. We're going to go back to the traditional director of technology and facilities. I appreciated the committee last week approving the director of operations, but right now with two big holes there, we're going to look to solidify those departments and maybe do some restructuring again within that department to make sure we're as efficient as we possibly can be. Making sure we provide the services for our students with the tech background, the facilities background, and the ed tech piece that has really come in with the online curriculum that we purchased and the Chromebooks. So again, I'm not looking to add anything to the district budget, but I think we can restructure some things, giving opportunities and strengths of the new folks coming in. So I'll keep the district, the school committee informed. But that was something that happened a couple weeks ago. Steve, I knew a little bit longer, but Lauren's was something that you're going to have to approve that piece. When we have that, we will have small committees for all three. I know Lauren in special education, we do a lot with CPAC, so we'll have the president or a member of CPAC on that committee, on that search committee, and hopefully you have this all done by sometime in May. So those are the personnel updates. Yes.
I missed you, Jeff. Did you say how is Lauren going to be with us for some time?
She will be with us through June 30th.
Oh.
Nobody's leaving suddenly.
No.
Nobody's leaving suddenly. This isn't urgent. Nobody's leaving us in the limb. It's just they're giving us some time to replace, and and see how we can do things efficiently, effectively, and for the good of the district. So those are my personnel updates. Any other questions or any other feedback?
Do we need to, so I know if you're going to change that job description, will you bring those?
Yes.
You just bring the two back when you're ready?
We do have an older one of Director of Special Education.
Yeah, so not so much the Director of Special Education. If I remember correctly, we did the Director of Technologies and Facilities, and now, did you say you're going to split that back out?
Go ahead, George. Sorry.
So we do already have school committee pre-approved Director of Facilities and Director of Technology, ones that school committees previous have done. So the thing is that we
Got
will
it.
then reinstitute those.
So the reason we had to approve it was because you were creating a new job description for the hybrid.
It was new, right.
Because we're going back to the defaults.
And you've also had one which was either Administrator of Special Education or Director of Special Education, that committees before have already approved. So what's taking place is that if it's been already approved, we move forward. Sometimes in the case of, we have to update it just for what happens in life, but we've never brought those back because they've already been previously approved. We just put the update date.
Yep, and we have the new policy in terms of where the school committee scope is, and it's not the scope for those positions.
It would be for
Got
the
it.
special ed one.
Yep, yeah,
It
correct.
would be for the special ed one.
Okay.
Correct.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Student transportation busing, I know we've talked about this a little bit, and we had shared at our last meeting that the budget subcommittee had heard a presentation from Mr. Kane and Mr. Galvin, and we told the committee that we would share that information with you in this next public session. I know most of you were at the Whitman FinCom meeting last night where Mr. Kane and Mr. Galvin presented. I'm offering them an opportunity if they want to share a couple minutes of what they presented last night, if they so choose. And then I have some feedback for the committee, Mr. Kane, Mr. Galvin, everybody else. I did have a conversation with folks from DESE and from Mars. The bottom line here is, and I appreciate Mr. Kane and Mr. Galvin doing some work. They did a lot of work. They did a lot of numbers. They put a lot of time and effort into this, and it's awesome to see somebody looking at something through a different lens. Sometimes we get pigeonholed into how we look at it and the way it's been done, but sometimes an observer or somebody from the outside saying, hey, can you do something different, is worth the opportunity to vet and to talk through. And I think that's what Sean and John have done. And this isn't done yet either. This is an opportunity to see. I'll provide, again, the committee, my thoughts and what I heard from the department. And I think somewhere along the line, we're going to continue this. So Sean, I don't know if you want to speak to what you presented a little last night in that 2 to 5 minute
Just quick.
time span. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, thanks for the opportunity to talk. Sean Kane, 31 Forest Street. Well, just quickly, my background a little bit is with the Finance Committee, and on a short list of things that the Finance Committee in Whitman has been concerned about, non-mandated busing has been one of them. And for me, I think over the last couple of years, hearing them have some concerns has been giving us some motivation to look into it deeper. So last year, when you presented on the non-mandated busing and Mr. Stanbrook gave the presentation, it was helpful to have more insight into how non-mandated busing worked and the routes and the tiers and the way that things were proportioned in Whitman versus Hanson definitely gave us better insight as to how just the non-mandated busing versus mandating busing worked. But at the time, we didn't have like the numbers behind that methodology. I do remember at the time, though, it was brought up that because one of the questions from the leadership in Whitman and the Finance Committee was, well, what would happen if we chose to discontinue non-mandated busing? And could you run a scenario where that would be the case or whatnot? So I remember at the time that the cost savings did not equal what we're paying for in non-mandated busing. So that was like a curious kind of like, well, from like a common sense point of view, that didn't sit well with me. Not that it couldn't be the case, just that I didn't understand why that would be the case. So I was thinking that last year, and then this year it was a similar presentation. This is just a couple weeks ago, right? That Mr. Stanbrook gave us a similar presentation, but this time he included the numbers. And that was good because the numbers gave us some further insight into specifically how they calculated the methodology. And without getting into too much of the details, basically the big number that stood out to me there was and this is another kind of curious thing, that if we chose to discontinue non-mandated busing, we would get significantly more mandated state reimbursement. So again, that kind of didn't sit well. Like, well, why would that be? If you'd think that despite what we do with non-mandated busing, our mandated reimbursement should be the same. But based on the calculations, and it wasn't a small difference, it's like we'd get $300,000 more or something like that in state reimbursement. So again, there was a couple of things that just felt like I need to understand this more, because obviously we're in a tough budget situation, and if there's any way that we can find efficiencies, it's only going to make things better. So that was really, for me, the motivation to move forward, to kind of look into this. Not to be like, oh, we're catching the schools and something. More like, geez, if we can do some subcommittee work, work with the budget subcommittee, and maybe find some efficiencies, ways that we can potentially get more state reimbursement and decrease the cost to the towns, then that's a win-win. You know, so I think the feedback that we're going to hear from Mr. Simonak is that the proposal that we put together, which really maximized the amount of state aid that we'd get back, the amount of state reimbursement that we get back, and really, as much as we could, decrease the towns, that proposal doesn't seem like it's going to fly. But my biggest takeaway from the experience is, as you said, it's not over. I mean, that didn't fly, but we can still roll up our sleeves and investigate a little bit further. Are there efficiencies that we can find? You know, can we tweak that a little bit to see if there are ways that we can, you know, find some more efficiencies. So that's really where this comes from, and I really appreciate the opportunity for, you know, even just to speak now and to work with the budget subcommittee. I look forward to working with you guys in the future. Thank you.
Thanks, Sean.
Thank you.
Thanks. So part of the charge last Wednesday, we met at 8:30 last Wednesday after the school committee, was to kind of look at this proposal again. And Chris had asked me to reach out to Desi, which I did, and I had a conference call with Christine Sullivan. We all know Christine. She was here before. Christine Lynch, I'm sorry. Jay Sullivan. And Rob O'Donnell was there, but he didn't really speak. He tried to interject at one point, and Jay just shut him up. It was a spirited conversation, lasted about 40 minutes. And I think when I had written the question to them, they thought it was really about the assessment. And one of the things is, well, the towns can assess this any which way they want, and it's up to your regional agreement and this and that. And about 15 minutes in, I said, no, wait. So we're trying to maximize our reimbursement, and we have two simulations or two scenarios. And Christine used the word simulation. I said, so what we want to do, our overall cost of busing, and I gave them a number of 1.8. I said, it's $1.8 million. We bus everybody, mandated, non-mandated. And I did have a conversation with Mars the next day, and they recommended we use the word eligible and not eligible instead of mandated and not. So she said, so I said 1.8 for everybody. I said, but you know what we did? I said, we were asked to run a scenario. How much would it cost to just run the eligible or mandated kids? And I said, it came up to 1.7 something million dollars. I said, and that would be the cost that we would submit to you, to the state for reimbursement. And Jay was all perplexed, and he's like, well, how come? I said, then what we do, I said, we bill the town of Whitman and the town of Hanson the difference of 1.8 to what their not mandated folks are. And for the town of Whitman, it's $400,000. For the town of Hanson, it's 100 plus. I said, so what we bill the state for reimbursement is 1.3, give or take, you know, a couple of dollars here. So then he said, well, I don't understand. And if you've ever heard Jay, I don't understand how it can be 1.3 and 1.7. What this? I said, well, we do tiers. And he said, I get the tiers. I said, if we cut the students, the 700 plus students off of Whitman and the 150 off of Hanson, we reduce the amount of tiers that we have. Some of our buses are 4 tiers, some are 3, some are 2, and some are 1. And the most cost effective are the 3 and the 4. He goes, yeah, I get it. So moving forward to that, Christine said, so what? And I said, what the proposal is we bill you for 1.7, but we would like to transport everyone. We're not going to cut the non-mandated piece. And so Christine said, so you have 2 simulations. You have a simulation here where you would keep all the students off the bus, simulation A, and bill and ask for 1.7 in reimbursement. And then really in B, you're still busing all the students. And she said, that doesn't work. And I said, well, we're looking to maximize this. She goes, you have to account for all those students to the state on your end of the year report. And then Jay went into some more language about you just can't do that. So I said, so what I can go back to the town is we can continue to look, but we can't bill for one and do the other, or do both. I said, no, you have to do this one or this one. And okay, so I'll bring it back. He then mentioned, you know, if you build, and John was in the meeting with me, he goes, if John submits the end of the year report, and last year it was 1.3, and you have 1.7 this year, I'm gonna flag you for an audit. He goes, unless we call you and you justify where you put those other students. So I said, okay. He goes, that would be an automatic phone call. What's going on? He goes, I probably wouldn't give you your reimbursement until we spoke. And he goes, and we would flag that. Now, on the positive side, I did ask him what reimbursement was gonna be, and he said 90%. So last year, John, we were about 95. He did say it's 90 right now. So
92 it was last year.
So that's better than what we've ever gotten. So he didn't discredit, well, he did. He said, you just can't do that. And Christine said that. So that's where we left it. And again, coming back to the committee and to the towns, and I spoke to Chris afterwards, and I said, we're gonna continue to work at that. But they said, you have to account for every student on what you're doing. You just can't say this and then do this. So we finished with that, and then, I don't know.
So Jeff, let me ask just
sure.
a clarifying question, because I asked you this one before, and you answered it the same way. I think if I understood correctly, what Desi said was, you could do what you're saying, but you need to do it.
Yes.
So for example,
you could do A.
For example, if non-mandated busing was eliminated,
You could do A.
then you could absolutely submit for the reimbursement. Where they were getting hung up is you can't run a simulation and say, well, this is what it'd be if you weren't doing it and then not doing it. So for example, I'm not advocating for this, but just for clarity purposes, because it made sense to me, if we eliminated non-mandated busing and our mandated bus expense actually went up to 1.7 million,
It's
then they
reimbursable.
would have no problem with us submitting the 1.7.
Correct.
So that's kind of, you know, when you look at it through their perspective, you can kind of see they want it to be an actual, not a estimated, so.
On the follow-up with Mars, and I know, John, you have a comment or a question. On the follow-up with Mars 2, one of the recommendations from Maureen, the executive director, is to ensure that if you have to maximize your reimbursables, you make sure you count every eligible student and give them a seat. To maximize your reimbursables, you make sure every student that needs to have or should have a seat, by law has supposed to have a seat, you make sure they have a seat. So she just, didn't dissuade, but didn't say you should ask kids if they need a seat or not. She's like, even your high school kids, if they say 300 are gonna drive, make sure you have a seat on the bus for them. That will maximize your reimbursement. I don't know what that'll do to the cost or additions to tiers. I'm sure at the high school level, we have room on the bus. So I don't know if Karen, and again, this just happened yesterday, I don't know if Karen has taken those kids off the bus, but she said to maximize that piece. And then they did, and Chris and I had a brief conversation. Steve Hemman, and we all know Steve too, he goes, you could look at mileage too. He goes, in Mohawk Regional Valley, they look at mileage, about reimbursables for mileage if you're further away. He did say, how big is your communities? They said, we're not like Mohawk or Frontier or anything out in Western Mass where you're driving 16, 17 miles to get to school. But he said, to maximize that, you might want to look at your mileage. When I said Whitman is 5 square miles, he's like, well, that's not going to do much. But I did say Hanson's a little bit bigger. But he wasn't, they were trying to find us opportunities to maximize our reimbursables. That's all. But Jay was pretty upfront saying that the way you propose the scenarios is not necessarily good for the district. So I don't know, Chris, if you want to go to Fred or John.
Let's do committee and then open it up, yeah.
Couple things. One, is that meeting recorded? Did Desi record? I assume it was on Zoom.
Yes.
Can we get a copy and publish that so that everyone can have the advantage of seeing it?
I told Jay it was recorded. I would prefer to have the committee view it and not put it on our website. But, that's, I can record it. It was recorded. It was a meeting with the superintendent and the business manager. We did record it so that the committee could see it.
Okay. I think that, I know I'd like to see it, but I think in transparency, it should be put up there for, whoever wants to see it to be able to see it as well. Number two, just sort of thinking this out, what if the town of Whitman and the town of Hanson said, don't worry about non-mandated busing, eliminate it. We're not gonna pay it. So now you're gonna charge the whole amounts, and we will transport children that need a ride. They'll contract with somebody, they'll handle it. Would they save money? I mean, I don't know, these are things that maybe people need to look into.
Clarify for me, who's we?
No, the towns.
Oh, so the
With
town
the
would
towns.
transport it themselves?
Right.
Sure.
So if they did,
So,
I think there's another item that you brought up pertaining to the responsibility and authority for regional transportation.
so part of that conversation too, as we broke this down, follow up to that, we talked about the regional agreement, whatever, and I said, well, you know, what happens is we vote our budget, and they said, well, how do you do this? I said, we vote the budget, and then we send the non-mandated to the communities, and it goes to the Board of Selectmen to determine whether or not we do this. And he said, well, that's incorrect. The school committee, when they vote the budget, you vote the budget number, and are responsible, and in our regional agreement, says if the school committee votes mandated or non-mandated transportation, they send it, it goes. If the school committee chooses to not support non-mandated busing, it goes to the Board of Selectmen. And that's in our regional agreement right now. So as we have voted the budget in the past, you've included non-mandated busing. So we also have to have a follow-up conversation with the selectmen, Chris and I spoke about this, and how the article is presented to the community. Because it could be broken into the three pieces. And I know in Hanson, it's the operating assessment, transportation, and debt. But according to Jay, that should be one article voted once, not three different decisions by the community.
and
And going back, because Chris went back to 1992 in town reports, that's what it's been since the dawn of the region, that's what it's looked like. So Jay said, no, if the school committee affirms a budget, you determine the operating assessment, the transportation, the debt, all that, to the communities, and the towns vote that. What he did say, and it's in our regional agreement, if you choose not to support the non-eligible, non-mandated busing, it then would go to the Board of Selectmen for their approval to put on the town warrant as an article.
yeah.
So we have to have that conversation as well.
And if you look at what DESI publishes as far as transportation, there's very brief mentions and very, very brief online. But in relationship to the end-of-year report, the only thing they say is, this is where the amount goes, this is the line that it goes under, and an asterisk saying apportioned as per the regional agreement. That's it. There's no formula, there's no right way, there's no wrong way. So, I mean, with all due respect to Mr. Sullivan, you know, is he the ultimate authority?
Well, he actually said it was the law. So I don't know, I haven't been able to check the
Okay.
law on how that
Right.
goes.
So-
But that was the next part of the conversation, getting it to the selectmen.
Right, and then there's a regional agreement that does have a section that specifically talks to
Correct.
the region is responsible for transportation. So I think what we had talked about, we're not, you know, literally this is all within the last 48 hours. So what we had talked about was, let's get the facts, let's understand the regulation, let's make sure we look at the agreement, let's have a conversation with all of you, hey, this is what we found, let's have a conversation with the selectmen and try and make sure we're all on the same page, rather than just, you know, whipsawing and doing things piecemeal. So, but the reason we were bringing it up now is to your point of, you know, no idea is too out of the box, right? But your idea of, hey, let's remove the transportation responsibility from the district for non-mandated and have it be the towns, we're gonna have to flush that legality piece out, because if the legality is that clearly resides within the district, then that would preclude kind of the suggestion that you just had.
But we could also eliminate non-mandated busing as well, which is something I'm not an advocate for.
Correct. We
mean,
could do
yeah.
that. And then I think the other piece that we talked about, and again, this is why it's a good process, is as we move forward, something we can look at within the budget subcommittee intuitively is, you know, like what Jeff just talked about, distance, right? So, okay, fine, maybe you can't run a simulation and say, we're gonna submit based upon a simulation, but, you know, I don't know, intuitively, David lives 1.5 miles away and I live 5 miles away. Like, I'm not sure that's really the same cost, right? If you're taking a taxi or a plane, or like, we charge for distance, IRS. So I think there's still ways that we can take this back and continue to look at this, whatever that is, Fred, and include some of those other things, so.
I mean, any relief we can give our towns is more funds that we have available
Right.
for our
But-
operating.
I agree with that.
But I think the part that we're going to continue to do is if we make a change like this, we are going to proactively share with DESI what we're doing and then do it, not do it and then create God knows what kind of issue after the fact. So whatever we come up with, we'll share it transparently with everyone and go from there, so.
Would you entertain a motion to have the meeting placed on our website for viewing by the public and ourselves?
So did you tell Jay, you told Jay it would go to the school committee? Did you tell him it was going to be shared publicly? So I would want to make sure that he's clear on that before he does that.
Yeah.
So if you, maybe if he asks Jay and he says it's fine, publicly fine, if not, and he was,
I don't see why not, but I do want to just ask him.
okay. So what do you want for a motion, Fred?
The motion would be that it gets placed on our website for the viewing of the school committee and the public. You know, if you, that's my motion. Someone wanted to amend it to, you
Okay,
know,
well, is there a second?
prior, but
I'll second.
Okay, discussion?
All right,
I'll make an
clearly we
amendment.
gotta, yeah.
Yeah, I'll make an amendment to that, that after prior discussion with Mr. Sullivan on his okay, that we make it on the website.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor of the amendment? All those against? All those abstaining? Okay. Michelle, you got it?
Yep.
Okay.
Okay, I'll email Jay.
So hold on, now we have
the
the
amendment.
amended.
Oh, yeah, the amendment,
Any
sorry.
discussion on the amended motion?
Sorry.
You have a point of order, or do you have discussion?
Yeah, I guess it would be a point of order.
Sure.
You just said what privilege you're invoking to, it's not executive session privilege, it's two public bodies in a public meeting.
Who are the public bodies?
Superintendent and the Assistant Commissioner of Education. I would say, I mean, if you don't put it up, I'm going to stand up here momentarily and just say, this is an official FOIA request for the...
Yeah, and I think you can certainly do that, but there is a process for that. It's not standing at the mic. Yeah.
I mean,
So I think there are, well, so Randy, I guess where I would disagree is there are documents that the school committee
but this
receives
isn't a
that,
document, this was a public Zoom meeting.
yeah. So I mean, again, I don't think there's anything controversial in it.
With the public.
I just think pragmatically, Randy, you know, if you're talking with someone from DESI, you would extend that courtesy of, hey, you know, we did tell you we record this, we're going to make it available. So if you want to call him, he knows, great, whatever. That's the amendment. And if, I don't know, you can probably put something, you'll either put something on the website by Friday or,
As soon as I.
or there will be a
Depending on the
communication.
will
that
of the
you
committee,
can-
right. You know,
Right.
I will do whatever. I don't have a feeling, I feel that Jay's not going to have an issue, but I would like the courtesy to tell him that it's going to be public.
Right.
Because it was a private meeting. It was a meeting between he and I, and the director of business with his assistant. So it wasn't a public posted meeting. It was a meeting.
How will you be disseminating it to the school committee?
Yeah, it would be a FOIA request because they do it by email, correct?
Okay, so why don't we leave it as just, so I think I think everyone here is for the spirit of transparency. Again, I think if you're recording someone for informational purposes, if you're going to share it, just giving that professional courtesy of, hey, we're going to share it. And so maybe it's, hey, we're going to share this publicly, just giving you a heads up. That's the motion, and with the goal of, let's see if we can post it Friday, because I don't think there's anything cloak and dagger
there's nothing
here.
cloak and
I
dagger,
think it's just, you got to work with these people, and you want to build that relationship, so, again, there's not surprises in terms of that, so. Okay, so we have a motion. Any further discussion? All those in favor? All those opposed? Oh, that was unanimous. All right, thank you. So hopefully look for that by end of week.
Yeah.
Great. Anyone else in the committee? Because I know John's been waiting patiently. So John, go ahead.
Thank you. John Galvin, High Street, Whitman. Obviously, in listening to the explanation, there seems to be a lot of confusion in the initial proposal and how it was presented to DESI. I'm disappointed that as the author of that proposal, that Sean and myself weren't invited to that meeting and possibly could have had a different way of explaining it to them. what was run in the scenarios that were run by Mr. Stanbrook are not scenarios on how busing works. They're, that's the actual cost that it would be if we eliminated those programs. We don't buy seats for pupils from first student. We buy buses, okay? And we buy an X amount of buses for the eligible students. When we then add the service for Hanson for the uneligible service, we are then charged an additional amount of buses in tiers. And the same would go for Whitman. So I have to disagree with Mr. Kane in that I do not believe that our formula or our proposal cannot be utilized. First of all, as the author of this proposal, I find it odd that you're not willing to share the video with me of it. It just doesn't sit right with me. Something wasn't explained properly or wasn't understood properly. I think I at least deserve the courtesy, and Sean at least deserves the courtesy, to view that so that we can understand exactly what Desi had to say, so that then we have the opportunity, as if it is the case that our formula can't be used, that we have the opportunity to go ahead and modify that in a way that Desi has outlined. I just, again, find it odd that first of all, the fact that they're saying we can't use this formula going forward. I can understand Desi's concern of us utilizing it in fiscal 22 to put on our end-of-year report, because that's not the way we assessed it. We assessed it the old way, and that was approved at town meetings. So the fact that we then go ahead and use the new formula to report it on the fiscal 22 year-end report, I could understand how Desi would have an issue with that. And honestly, that was something that we all talked about in those subcommittee meetings, and initially is actually the way that Sean and I submitted the proposal, not doing it, not implementing it in fiscal 22's end-of-year report. All right? But I still don't understand Desi's not allowing us to use it going forward. Scenario 6 in the proposal that Sean and I have made outlines that with just going forward with it, not claiming it in this year's. Yeah, we lose a lot of reimbursement, but going forward, we then implement it the way that we've outlined it. They're not, these are actual costs. How can Desi have an issue? We've gone through, Sean and I, before we even made the proposal, we went through and I even emailed Jay Sullivan. Jay, this is what we're trying to do. Does Desi have any guidance on this? And Jay came right back to me via email, which I shared in my packets, right? No, Desi doesn't have any guidance on this. Now all of a sudden they do? I'm just confused, right? So I'd like to see that video, please. And I'd like to continue to work towards utilizing the formula that we outlined as it existed. Maybe not, there's definitely some rough patches with it because we don't get that extra reimbursement this year. But going forward, and the years after that, and the years after that, is when the realization comes in of maximizing the bus reimbursement. Because it's my opinion and several other opinions that we haven't been maximizing our bus reimbursements, and this is an opportunity to do it, and that we should do it going forward. Thank you.
Thank you. And John, just to clarify, I think we just said every effort is going to be made to share the video. So
Yeah, John, I don't have
that's
a
the
problem
plan.
with sharing the video. I just want to let him know. That's all, honestly.
So there's no attempt to, again, not share. So I think, to me, the simplest way to do this would be, let's get the video out. Everyone can get to the same place of understanding, and then we can all have a conversation about how do we move it forward. So rather than guess or try to start creating some sort of thought that there's something to hide. There isn't. Let's just go through it all, and then we can put it on an agenda. And if we want to have a meeting to talk about busing again, I think we've done that in the subcommittee. We can continue to do it here. So, yes.
Randy Lamartina, Selectman, Town of Whitman, 6 River Birch Circle. Something I want to make clear to the committee and to anybody watching at home is the numbers we're talking about are not John and Sean's numbers. the true cost, the actual cost of mandated busing was established by your business manager. Why DESI will not let you submit for the actual cost of mandated busing is a question that is really looming large to me. Whether or not a certain plan can be implemented mid-year after you receive funds, hey, I get that. I guess that would be the fraud you spoke of in your email to the chair of my committee. But as far as an audit, speaking for the town, I think we would welcome that at this point, because clearly what we see is the town of Whitman is subsidizing mandated busing. Flat out. We see that with the numbers that your business manager has provided. Because the cost of mandated busing is X, and we're getting charged a large portion. That does not make sense to me. 14 months ago, I sat in a presentation, and Chris, it was supposed to be looked into. And now at the 12th hour of establishing a budget, we're going to look into that again. I'm sorry, but this feels eerily similar to a couple years ago where it's legal, folks. What we did was legal. We talked to DESI. Why, beyond John and Sean, two basic lay people, the town of Whitman that really has been putting this forward, why wasn't anyone from the Finance Committee who's pushed this? Why wasn't anyone from the Board of Selectmen asked to be involved in this meeting so we could vet some questions with DESI? Once again, we just have, this is the way we approached it. And I'm sorry, again, it's eerily similar to, we don't know how you posed the question. We don't know if the question was focused around, can we implement it this year? In your email, it talks about fraud and audits, and I can see that if we're technically double dipping by the town paid a portion and now we're trying to get reimbursed. I understand that. But was the simple fact that we've established, and what I mean by school personnel, that we have a number for mandated transportation. We're not charging that. What can we do to fix it? Beyond what happens to the towns, I think that then sorts itself out. I mean, was Mr. Sullivan or Christine Lynch told that, oh, by the way, the town of Whitman is, if you look at our true mandated cost, is subsidizing mandated transportation through non-mandated?
So I will respond to a couple things because I just am not going to have things made up. So a couple things. So we just said we'll share the video, everyone can go through it. So we can sit here and keep making stuff up, or we can share the video and we can go through it. It's pretty simple. I think for a calculation standpoint, it's pretty clear. The request that was made, that was delivered in terms of busing was, what would it look like if we eliminated non-mandated busing? That was the presentation. It wasn't, what is the cost? And that was not the question. The question was, what are the costs if we eliminated non-mandated busing? And you figured out what those costs. And if we eliminate non-mandated busing, DESI said, you can change your reimbursement. What they said is, you can't send us a document that says, if you eliminate non-mandated busing and the costs go up to that, that's your new cost. I think, if I understand correctly, they said they would consider that fraud. And we can all have our opinions, but at the end of the day, DESI is the state, and they're the ones that are going to make that determination. So at this point, we're going to simply share the video and we will go through it. So that's simple.
You'll be right with you because I've been waiting. Thank you so much, Mr. Lamatina. Thank you, Mr. Lamatina.
I'll recognize
I'm
Rosemary,
counterpointing you. Thank you so much. My name is Rosemary Conley. I am with the Whitman Finance Committee, and I'd like to straighten out some facts. The town administrator of Whitman was given information on the split prior to Mr. Tuffy bringing a 60-40 split regular back, and there are laws that do govern this. When the schools attempted to split the busing to 60-40, there is a video of the past town administrator coming up and insisting that Whitman would elected to pay additional fees. There have been some question within Whitman Finance on what that means. So I'm unaware of how the schools have done something illegally, but I do think that we have to question past practices in the town. And additionally, there are laws that govern this. Chapter 71, Section B is one of them. And in the laws and regional finance books, they do say that it is governed through the regional, ultimately through the regional agreement. So the question would be, when we change the mileage, is it a legitimate regional agreement? So that would be the only question that you'd begin to have. But I do want to make it very clear that the schools did attempt to do the 60-40 split, and were told by Mr. Lyman that the towns had elected to pay more. Thank you.
Anyone else? And Randy, at this point, we're not talking about busing. So I'm not going to have you keep coming back and forth and saying it feels like or it looks like, so.
You just said you were going to recognize, I just want to.
No, I didn't say I was going to recognize you. I said I recognized Rosemary, so that's what I recognized. So unless someone else has something else on busing at this point, unless the committee would like to take a vote to the contrary, we will share the video and we will all go from the same point of reference and data rather than starting to surmise about what was said, what wasn't said, and whatever conspiracy someone wants to try and spin.
If our school liaison to the Board of Selectmen wanted to rebut a fact, I feel that as a body, we should at least give him that opportunity, you know, to
Make a motion to take a vote,
So you take a vote to do what?
to recognize Randy or not at this point, or move on with, you know.
Is that who he's representing himself as? I mean,
We don't know.
Point of order, is he a selectman? Is he a personal person? He's a liaison. I think that's a huge fact on what he's representing himself as.
So I really think at this point, so we're not going around in circles, and so people aren't guessing, that we should, again, share the video. We can all watch the video. We can see what was asked, how it was asked, what was presented, and then we can have a complete discussion on busing. Is there anyone that feels otherwise?
I'd like to second Mr. Scriven's motion that we recognize or not recognize. I don't know.
I was-
want to phrase
So
it.
what's the
I'll rephrase my motion. I'd like to make a motion to move on to the next agenda item.
Second.
Okay. Any further discussion? All those in favor? All those opposed? Okay. All right.
You want to talk about continuous improvement? You got that covered.
Yeah, I think my only other point that I wanted to make here, I don't know if this got lost, was I think the whole conversation around busing, although it's been challenging at times, is a good opportunity, as you alluded to find things that perhaps we can do better. To me, that's where our focus needs to be. We can go around in circles and spend time on, you know, pulling at strings, or we can get to some of these things. Like, again, I think at the end of the day, these two gentlemen here, and it was these two gentlemen that approached the budget subcommittee with this last piece. Maybe there was other folks in the past, but they brought something to a budget subcommittee. We had a conversation. Others are engaged in the conversation. If we can find ways to improve, even if it's hard or it's difficult or it makes us change the way we've done things, that's what we have to do. Because as soon as we just say, well, that's the way we've done it, or we're not going to change, then we're going to be stuck for a really, really long time. So overall, I think if we can find opportunities for continuous improvement, that will help us going forward. Where are we going?
Just
Budget.
Just some information that Chris
Oh, yeah.
gathered from the towns.
Yeah, so a couple things. So Lincoln did, I had said I wanted to get some information on the budgets in terms of the town increases and how that looked like with the schools increases. So Lincoln was able to provide that, so thank you, Lincoln. And Hanson I still don't have yet because they haven't put together the FY23 budget numbers. So I'm still working through this. I'd like to share what kind of comes up. But my first glance is that if we look at the town's overall operating budgets, and we pull out the schools and we look at those increases year over year, 21, 22, 22 versus 23 projected, I think where the schools are kind of ending up with this 2.5%, 3%, 3%-ish overall budget increase is pretty much in line or less than what the towns are doing with their overall budget. So that's the information I'm looking for. As soon as I get that, we'll share that at a subsequent meeting. but I really didn't get those numbers for FY23 on the Hanson side. Whitman FinCom, we met last night.
Yeah, so I just wanted to thank you to Rick and the rest of the FinCom for hosting us. I did make a request, Lincoln, I did make a request to Rick next year to get us on a little earlier, if possible, so I could share some information with them before we set the assessment and see where they are. So it was a good discussion. Not many questions were asked, but we were able to present the budget to them, kind of present what we talked about, the scenarios last week. And I appreciated their dialogue with us and continued work. One of the comments that Rick did have was something we alluded to at the joint Board of Selectmen's meeting, was maybe getting all the boards together, both FinComs, both Selectmen, School Committee, in a public meeting to talk about budget so that everybody's on the same page. We have an idea of where Whitman is, where Hanson is, where the schools are at, you know, before we're certifying a budget. So something to look forward to next year is maybe having that joint budget discussion with both communities and both boards. He did allude to that the FinCom should be more involved with the schools and the towns so that we can share information in a clear way, in a timely fashion. So thank that.
And then the only other update, just housekeeping before we get into the kind of the main budget topic, was I did reach out to the chair of the Hanson Finance Committee, Kevin Sullivan, because I knew we were meeting with Whitman. I did say, hey, you know, we're probably going to be voting on, well, we need to vote an assessment tonight. But in terms of like understanding where the town is, we really haven't received any of that. So he did extend the opportunity tentatively for next Tuesday, the 22nd. That would be after our assessment. So it really wouldn't be a budget presentation. It would be to simply understand where the town is. I will defer to the will of the committee if that's something we want to do or not. So if we want to set the assessment and move on, understood. Personally, I'm always interested in listening. I don't necessarily have to agree, but listening to what the town has to say in terms of financials. And in the case of Hanson, I still don't think we have a lot in terms of budget. So I will ask the question to the committee, general consensus. I don't think we need a motion. Folks interested in having that meeting next Tuesday if again we're invited, or would prefer not to? Thoughts?
Well, I was going to say, you know, I mean, it really won't make a difference to what we decide tonight.
Correct.
Because we're going to do our job.
We only have,
And that's their job. And I have said that time and time again. Our job, I'm not saying we don't care what the towns are, because we certainly do, and we take that in consideration whatever we do. But our job is to worry about our budget tonight and what we have to do. I have no problem with going and listening, because it might help us for next year. I don't know, you know, but, I mean, that's everybody's opinion. You know.
Well, I would enjoy going. I'll be out of town next week, so.
got it. You don't want to fly back?
It would be here.
Actually drive back, but
Again, I need to follow up with him, so, because he may, you know, something may change. This was tentative. I just felt we had met with everyone else, and it might be an opportunity to at least listen to what is said, so, okay. So we'll schedule that if they're willing, if they're meeting. We tentatively talked about, he said there's no way everyone would fit in that room, so I think Jeff said the school was available. So I will reach out to him after. You know, they may change their mind. If not, it is what it is. But if you see the invite and you'd like to attend, that would be great. So thank you. All right. All yours.
So a little bit, so as we are with budget, we started February 2nd with the presentation. We've met a few times with the committee, questions and answers back and forth. And I think last week, the ask of presenting different scenarios, what they look like, assessments, total budget numbers, as I presented to you. And the recommendation from the committee was to move forward with number 3 as a scenario. And I'll state this is implementing the budget as presented with 2 special education teachers, putting $400,000 in for Chromebooks with an offset of using E&D for that, using E&D as a $125,000 of E&D for paying the water bill, the settlement, implementing full day K, and no other costs from E&D to implement full day K. So the operating budget or assessment to the town of Whitman under scenario 3 was $16,899,943.66. That's $16,899,943.66 with an increase to the town of Whitman of $785,040, or a 4.87% increase of their operating assessment. The Hanson operating assessment will be 13,341,812 with an increase of 695,694 or a 5.5% increase of the assessment. Total budget would be 58,492,314 with a general fund increase of 1.694,734 or 2.98% increase to the budget. The documents that John uploaded or Michelle uploaded last night, we're changing all those documents, the graphs and everything to that scenario. So it's nothing different. It was just uploading the new numbers to that to make sure that you had those documents and they were available publicly as we go. So nothing, that original document had been updated with some changes. This was what John updated yesterday with that scenario. One of the questions that came out outside of this was ESSER. And in your packet, close to the end, you have a sheet where it shows the ESSER professional staff members. We're looking to add people, 4 people using ESSER funds. It's towards the end. It's in your packet. It's not in the budget presentation piece. Michelle packet.
The handout. Yeah, the small packet.
The one she handed today or the one that you emailed?
The small packet.
Towards the end.
Count.
Oh, that one.
Calendars in the back.
Here you go. What's in this?
Yeah.
I think John put it in there as well, but I wanted it as a handout for you.
You just had that.
Yeah, we got it.
So these are the folks that we're looking to add and keep in the ESSER funds for FY23 and FY24. Those are the professional staff. We also have paraprofessional staff, as I noted before, and a few other things. But as I noted, using ESSER money for professional staff is kind of required within that grant. One of the other pieces was, sustainability and how it's used for. And one of the pieces that I stressed to the committee is in FY25, I'm not sure how this all plays out. And George sent me something. We were invited to take part with the Rennie Center. And if you remember the Rennie Center, we've been partnered with them for 5 or 6 years. They're looking at how the use of ESSER funds affects student learning and what happens when it goes away. So George, you want to just speak to that a little bit? I think we're one of 6 schools that was invited in.
Sure. So, hi folks. So the Rennie Center is an education and research policy group. They've been around for over 50 years, and I just want to read to you their mission. The mission of the Rennie Center is to improve public education through well-informed decision-making based on deep knowledge and evidence of effective policy-making and practice. As Massachusetts' preeminent voice in public education reform, the Rennie Center creates open spaces for educators and policymakers to consider evidence, discuss cutting-edge issues, and develop new approaches to advance student learning and achievement. Through our staunch commitment to independent, nonpartisan research and constructive conversations, we work to promote an educational system that provides every child with the opportunity to be successful in both school and life. So the Rennie Center we have partnered with in the past. If you remember, 5 or 6 years ago, we had the Excel, which is Excellence in Social Emotional Learning. That was an aspect, and that was an outgrowth of both the Massachusetts Educators Association, the school superintendents, the school principals, and the Rennie Center. So the Rennie Center partners with different people. They partner with schools, and they partner with schools of education at the higher level, and then they partner with specific institutions. So what this is we have been invited to be one of 6 districts that says, if we partner with them, the Rennie Center is going to produce research and help us with basically a digital blueprint of not only how we've decided to spend ESSER, but how that spending then affects the practices that we do daily, how it affects the students that will be in our care, and then is it based on educational research and best practice. With them, we have these conversations and we develop this blueprint. And the blueprint that's going to be developed is that how is it sustainable and how do we move forward to keep it sustainable if it's viable and they feel that it is. So these 6 districts will then be part of this larger research program, which will then get published to all of the schools in Massachusetts, or all of the districts in Massachusetts, as the blueprint to say what is effective coming out of COVID. They realize that ESSER funds are very good. They're here. They're sometimes one-time purchases. They have people involved, and they have to address learning loss. So they're looking to grab a continuum of districts to say, what have you done? This is what practice shows. What have you done? Do you need to tweak something as we move forward? And how does it best impact kids in education? We're lucky to do this. We know these people. This is at zero cost to the district. And we've preliminarily said, yes, we'd like to be involved in this. And we will move forward with a meeting next week to decide what the next steps are. So it's pretty exciting.
So I wanted to share that with you because that was one of the direct questions of, and my concern of, if we have these positions in through ESSER, are we going to need them and how are we funding them, or how do we tweak them? And it just randomly came across last week that they invited us. I think we've been a good partner and I jumped at the chance. So being able to share with the committee as we move forward into FY23 and then FY24 where we're at will, I think, help build our budget in the next couple of years.
So, based upon what I'm seeing, and tell me if I'm wrong, 7 positions,
Yes.
FY23, FY24, and FY25 eligible under ESSER 3.
FY23 and FY24, right? Not FY25. Grant ends. So
Okay, I
these-
thought we had until
September of 20,
24 to spend.
I think it has to be spent by that date.
Okay, so, but,
Not committed.
You can't.
okay.
Yeah.
I mean, for what I'm looking at in these positions, the 2 EL English language learners or teachers, those possibly would be adjusted after this year.
Potentially.
Yeah.
Potentially.
I mean, there's the potential.
There's potential for all of this.
For other funds. But this is what these monies are for, is so we can provide remediation for these kids. That's, to me, this is the perfect thing of what we should be spending this money on. You know, and if we're spending, you know, what, 11 million bucks? I'm sorry, $1 million bucks.
Yeah, I was
Jeez.
gonna say 11 minutes. Really? I take that too.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Must be that new job, Fred.
You know, if we're spending that, you know, and you still have 1-3 left, you know, to utilize in other areas, you know, I don't see how we don't do this.
So one of the things too, we talked about the sustainability or if I'm going to need those. And again, up in the air, because I think this is an opportunity with the Rennie Center to see this. But I did solicit my staff about retirements. And one of the pieces is in FY25, I will have 5 retirements that I can replace in the budget. And utilizing their salaries, I can probably buy 2.5 positions of these back in FY24. In FY25, that's another 2. FY26, there's 0. Nobody's retiring in 25. FY27, I'll have 4. And in FY28, just so the committee knows, as we go along, when I talk about attrition, I'm looking at 8 retirements. And out of that number, I have 3 floaters that said I'm retiring at some point, but I can't commit to what year. So when we talk about attrition, and I've talked a little bit about our lowering enrollment, our elementaries are going to be pretty sustainable and solid with our class sizes, unless we see a spike in our communities, and we're not seeing that in data. But I think through attrition, and Chris Jones isn't here, but as some of his high school teachers retire, we might be able to buy them out a full teaching position and add another based on their salary, based upon people. So we can see for the community looking forward, maybe getting that middle school foreign language back in. Related arts, based, not adding to the budget, but based upon the retirements and the loss of students at the secondary level. Keeping class sizes at a good spot, but we are built as a high school right now for about 1,200 students. We're going to be less than that in the next 5 years. So I can't guarantee anything, but this is my blueprint right now, what I'm looking at in my staff, and I don't know what's going to be out there. But this is part of the plan. If we decide I need those 2 ELs, I think I have them in the budget next year. I can move them over because of those retirements. Because the goal here from this committee was moving those folks, if needed, into the LEA budget, not relying on the grant because the grant's going to go away. So this is somewhat of my plan. I don't know it, and I can't validate that until that person actually retires, but I can have a good idea when they put their papers in. And I think I had a conversation with one of the committee members. Based on our teacher's contract, based upon people put their retirements in March the year before. So I know right now in March who's retiring in June of 23. but they actually don't retire till that last day of school. Something could change, and they could say to me, you know, life happened, something happened, I'm choosing not to retire. They still have a contract with us because they're a teacher. So it's really hard to estimate, and it doesn't come to fruition until they actually walk out the door. So we keep their salaries in the budget. So my retirements for next year are in the budget as a full retirement right now, if they're teaching now, because I don't know if they're going to retire in June. That's how we can use the sustainability piece or the attrition piece to make sure our budget is moving forward and we're not necessarily asking the towns for additions when we can actually fund some positions within the budget because of retirements and people leaving. So that's part of the plan, and I know the committee wanted the ESSER pieces, but these are the people right now that are being paid for in FY23 and FY24 from the ESSER 3 grant. And there is other monies that will be allocated to our summer program for some transportation, for some other needs and supplies as we go, substitutes, things like that that are built in due to COVID. So we can make amendments to that if needed, but we can't go too far off of what we proposed in the past when we wrote the grant. So basically what I'm asking the committee to consider tonight is my recommendation from last week is to vote an assessment tonight using scenario 3, funding full day K with no E&D, using E&D only for our Chromebooks and only to pay our Whitman water bill debt, which will come off the books for next year, adding those 2 teachers that we spoke about for those 2 sub-separate rooms, and funding the budget that way. And funding it, sending that assessment to the towns.
I'd say another comment too, Jeff. You know, like you say, the year of the 0 retirements, you really don't know that either.
I don't know that.
I mean, we could have a lot more.
Sure.
I mean, depending on how things go in school and stuff. And I mean, people can decide at the last minute, and so it could be even more retirement rather than less, I would think.
That's correct, because we also do, people are, to get the incentives from our teacher's contract, they have to notify me by March 1st of the previous year.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean...
20 years old.
Yes. That doesn't mean that people haven't said to me, it's April and I'm all set. I'm done. And I'm going to forego. And I had one of those last year. And people, and to Beth's point, people are a little bit tired. So we could see more than that in the next couple of years. And as we all know, teachers at top step are making significantly more money than a first-year teacher. So I'm looking at this as seeing some opportunity in the next 5 years and fiscal years to bring back some program, to add some things. And again, I've had the conversation with Dr. Jones. I know his schedule and I know how we run it because I was in that spot. And when we have 900 students, it's significantly less. I will need significantly less bodies in the building unless we develop new programs, and that's an opportunity for us as well. You know, if we exacerbate our program of studies, but we will need to maintain, for the good of the district, to understand those needs and use attrition appropriately and the retirements appropriately in the next 5 years.
I think it's important that everybody keeps in mind too, I think looking at retirements, and there probably are going to be more than we think, you know, there's a real possibility that these interventionists are around past FY24. I've said this before and I need to keep repeating it. Kids are going to need more than this next year and the year after. Especially our younger students, our older students, getting them ready for careers in college. If you think about a school, I mean, the last February, right? The end of February was when things kind of got back to normal for kids. And while they're resilient, the educational piece is really important. And I just think it's important that while we have retirements, we might still need these positions. So there is a possibility that we do have to spend more if we need to keep these positions in. Obviously, that's something for the 5-year plan, but I have concerns that people see this and like, oh, after FY24, we're not going to spend this money anymore. That's fine. It's a savings, and that can't be how we're thinking post-COVID. It can't. I am working with children every day. I have 3 young children of my own. Ask any educator, ask any parent, right? Kids need more these days, and we need to give it to them as, funding a public school. So, that's all.
Other questions or comments on the budget?
Scenario 5 from last week.
Yes, that's no full day K.
Correct. What additional does that include?
That is the two teachers, what you call it, two,
ECBA.
no,
EL.
I'm not counting ESSER at all. Those are the two sub-separate programs that Lauren had asked for.
And the ESSER is off to the side?
Yes,
so
ESSER is off to the side. I
we're
didn't
paying
include that in anything at all, no. Because it's from the grants. We get, all those positions from the grants aren't included in the LEA budget.
Good, Fred. Don?
Sure. Just wanted to follow up on the ESSER
Yes.
document. Thank you very much, because this is a plan. It's certainly presenting it for FY23. FY24 is a plan, but I want to make sure people understand that this committee is not committed to FY24 as it's presented here, because that's exactly what a plan is. It's what we predict may be the case, but when we're sitting here next year, this can look very different, because as we all know, life changes and students' needs change. Maybe we need more, you know? So this piece of it is very much can shift, because that's the essence, right, of a plan. You know, as I sit here and we have to vote this budget, I do think about who we represent, and it is the students and, of course, our staff. And the students are the ones who don't even have a vote. So it's up to us to make the responsible decision on a budget, and I think, you know, one of those is to accurately reflect what the cost is of education. So I just want to refer back to one line item in this. It's document 14 in the packet. Just because we didn't have a chance to go over all of them, and I just want to point out one of them, and it's on page 3. It's the curriculum. So instructional materials at the top of page 3.
You said document.
Document 14.
Okay.
Yeah.
General fund district-wide expenses?
Right. Instructional materials. And Jeff, you can correct me if I'm wrong. 'cause
Everyone's there? Everyone's got it? Yes?
I just got to make it larger because I'm blind to
Right,
that.
right.
14, right?
Yeah, it's like
14.
halfway through.
Page 3?
Yeah, so the FY22, the year we're in now, is 508,000 maybe? And this, I think, is our ELA curriculum, right? We funded that.
All our district curriculums.
All of them, right. So the budget we're voting on is recommended at 225,000. So it's a reduction of $283,000 in this line. We're essentially cutting half of it. However, you know, and after I'm done, I'll let you explain, Superintendent. But so I recognize that when I talk about a responsible budget and putting forth to the towns what education truly costs, there's a cut here to not fund curriculum this coming year, and technology needs of $400,000 that we know we're going to need Chromebooks. It's going to be a recurring expense. It is a supply of the district. It would be my feeling that we need to accurately reflect that in the budget, because to not do that would present a false picture of what our true costs are, and we're going to need those Chromebooks. So in looking at this, I would actually make a motion to set the FY23 budget at $58,892,314. That would be adding the $400,000, so not taking it from E&D.
Second. So actually, Don, do you mind just reading this is the actual language we need to read, and it just has an X. So where X is, just make it your number.
Oh, okay.
It's the first one, motion to certify.
Okay, motion to certify the FY 2023 Whitman-Hanson Regional School District budget at $58,892,314.12 in accordance with the pre-K through 12 Whitman-Hanson Regional School District Regional Agreement, Section IV, E2, and Mass General Law, small c 71, Section 16B.
Second. Thank you for reading that. Discussion.
So I would, if
Or-
I may,
Yeah,
can I
you
make
made
the
the
motion?
motion, yes.
Yeah, so I think one other comment that I will add is that we have declining enrollment. Superintendent just talked about that. High school is reducing. And I think as a district, we really need to look at why our enrollment's declining. Maybe it's not necessarily birth order or births, but students going to other schools. So how can we keep them here? How can we keep kids who live in Whitman-Hanson to come to Whitman-Hanson schools, right? And it's the product that we offer. And in things that we're not offering, things that aren't in this budget because we haven't been able to fund them in the past. And that would be no librarians. And that would be no full-time, year-round drama program at the high school. Performing arts director, we do not have. We do not have those regular Chromebooks in the budget. We know what we're lacking, and we know we have a long way to go. And you know, we did set 3 goals, and full-day kindergarten is in this. And the other was the Chromebooks. And I think by funding those with E&D doesn't meet our goal. It doesn't meet that goal if we simply use one-time money. And the third is the related arts. And I know we haven't been able to address that yet, but we want to. So that I know we can do better, and this is a path forward to let the towns know that this is the actual cost of education, and that technology is so important. It's not going away. Thank you.
I think I'm fast enough.
I have a question for Jeff. Why did that number go down?
Because to be transparent in the budget,
Yep.
we paid off our licenses. We won't have to pay off, we won't have to renew those licenses for a couple years.
So it's really, so now my question goes to Dawn. Are you putting the 400 in from the Chromebooks out of E&D and putting it there? Or were you questioning why that number went down? I guess I'm a little bit confused, because if it's just, it went down because licenses are paid, we don't need that, it's not a thing that we're taking away. Are you wanting to put that in to put the Chromebooks in the regular budget rather than E&D?
No, I'm not looking to change that curriculum line. I just wanted to point out the fact that that is a big reduction, and when those licenses come up for renewal again, or when we need to replenish curriculum, or maybe add, I don't know, a history, a science curriculum, a robotics or STEM curriculum or something, it's not in that line item right now, so just more for informational. But I think that recurring expense of the Chromebooks should be a regular line item in the budget.
So then so to follow up with that, when we were talking the 5-year plan and the plan with the Chromebooks that George has talked about, was that coming out of E&D, or we were trying to put it in the budget in the next couple of years?
So right now, and George can jump in, right now, I have X amount of Chromebooks going offline in June, and this is why it's an immediate purchase. And it couldn't necessarily count on the budget to sustain that. I'm going to go offline. So the recommendation or the proposal was to use it on E&D. Our next group of books are going to go offline in 26.
26 is the next large grouping, so the goal would be is that we put $275,000 away yearly, so that when those lumps are needed because of the expiration of so many, we will have that there. So it would hopefully become a recurring expense within the budget.
Because we don't want one, and then we have another one in 29.
29 would be the next expectation of Google, of them going offline.
But again, things can change and shift.
Yeah.
And again, trying to put forth a budget here that's clear and concise, and I don't want to put a line item in that we're not spending. So we spoke, we yelled back and forth.
It was an exciting meeting when Jeff decided, when it was finally determined for the good of the district to try to be fiscally responsible, that we were able to reduce that line. That line in curriculum will not always be that reduction, or Jeff and I will have a different type of meeting that shouldn't be aired. However, at this point in time, because we have had the ability to use funds properly and to do some good things with grants and things of that nature, we have paid off our major curriculums. So of the 6 years that we have Houghton Mifflin Harcourt, which is HMH, which is the elementary reading program, we have paid that off, and we will have 4 years left. We have paid off the math at iReady, and we will now have 3 years left next year. We have paid off the new grade 7 and 8 social studies curriculum for the middle schools, and that has 3 more years. We also We are purchasing, and we will do it this year with funds, a middle school ELA program, because we haven't had one since 2000, since I don't know when. And we've also been notified by DESE that we qualified for the Math Acceleration Grant. The Math Acceleration Grant is one that's out there by DESE through COVID, through their own funds, not our ESSER funds, that allows us to have 1 full year of digital curriculum for all of our students, for all of our teachers, and the professional development and materials that comes with that. We qualified, we received the grant from DESE, and we will now purchase iReady next year for both middle schools at grade, for grades 6, 7, and 8 for 1 year. When you look at all those factors, we will be okay as long as this money comes back for the next cycle that we need. Because we then have to start addressing what are we doing for elementary social studies, and then what are we doing for the replacement pieces needed at the high school. Because the high school is sort of subject specific, it's not 9 through 12 ELA specific, let's say, the amounts of money needed can be handled in a different way other than like a 6-year purchase that we have to do at the other levels. So that is why when we took all those factors in, we were able to reduce and try to make a fiscally sound, prudent decision on curriculum.
So to answer your question, Don, we have a plan too. I understand that's a cut, but I didn't want to show the community, yeah, we have this line item here and we're going to delineate it in different ways. We paid it off, we paid our bill, and now we reduce it in that way.
So hang on one second, because I just wanted to make a comment, and then we'll come around to you, Fred. So I think when we talked about the Chromebooks and budget subcommittee, right, what we talked about was making sure that there was some degree of understanding that that is an operational need.
Yes.
Right? Because if we're saying we need Chromebooks, and that's our one-to-one technology, then it is just going to be a continued ongoing expense. So what we had talked about, and I'll let you defer to your recommendation and what you wanted to do for this year, but what we talked about going forward was within that 5-year plan, starting to build something that basically says we're going to have some sort of expense. Now, how we do that, I think we still have to figure out, right? Because I'm not sure, other than earmarking funds in E&D, there isn't a good way to do it. So we had even started the conversation around, can we look at lease agreements? Can we look at the cycles so that we are kind of it almost makes sense if we know our total Chromebook population cost X, and we're going to have to replace them every 6 years. Well, theoretically, it's, if we could get onto that cycle, and I know we had to buy a bunch at once, but if we can kind of work our way onto that cycle, then it just becomes the same cost every 6 years, right? And so that's something that we have to figure out in terms of the 5-year plan. And I will mention this now because I had it on the notes as housekeeping. But the 5-year plan is something that I think as a budget subcommittee we're going to continue to work on. So even after the assessment's set, that's something that we need to keep working on. It's going to be a living document, and I think our goal is by the time the summer hits to have something come back to the committee and say, hey, this is what it looks like, and then go out to both selectmen and finance committees and say, this is what we have so far. So this is kind of being responsive to the, hey, we're not really sure. No, this is what we have. I think Don said it well. These are plans. They're based upon assumptions and what we have at that time. Things are going to change, but it does go to the spirit of communicating. This is what we think. This is why, etc. Here you go. You have it, and that hopefully will again breed some better communication. So I just wanted to touch on that because I think one of the things that is important to clarify is we're not voting very much the same way that Don said we're not voting ESSER for next year. This is what we have for this year. This is what it looks like for next year. We have a 5-year plan that we're working through. It's a living document. It's going to change. We'll continue to have it. We'll continue to update it. People will continue to see it. We're not voting the 5-year plan for this year's budget. So yes, Fred.
And this actually pertains to that as well. Curriculum, and obviously the Chromebooks are 5 years or greater. Curriculum in general, 5 years or greater?
Curriculum in general, you have the ability based on the funds that you have to set it up with the company as you see fit. Okay. So what we've done, because we've never really instituted it in a fashion that was over 18 years old, we went with as far out as we could for as best we could. The biggest difference since we were all children in school was that now when you have digital curriculum, you write into the contract that should standards change or should things change or should things get updated, it will update as you go. So that's the biggest thing. So we chose 6 years for this. We don't have 6 years for everything. Our two biggest at elementary school are 6 years each. We did 3 years for social studies because that was at a lesser degree because we weren't sure with 8th grade, which is now civics, and they had a lot of materials, we didn't need that. But you basically can design for what you need. I will say that ed research shows that you're really in year 3 is when you're really starting to hit your stride with curriculum as educators, so that you can make those changes and do what you need to do as best.
So we're allowed to have a separate capital fund as a region. And it was approved by Hanson. It was shot down in Whitman, and I want to say 4 or 5 years ago, maybe a little longer. Maybe that's something that we should revisit, because the accessibility of the money would be far greater for Mr. Stanbrook than having it from E&D once June 30th hits.
Sure. I
And
will
if
just
we
say-
had a plan to fund that.
I will
on
just
an
say this, I think there's always going to be some curriculum that has to sort of be in the LEA budget also, because there are needs that are serviced by these lines that aren't just specifically the whole curriculum document. But, yeah, that's up to you folks.
So this line item, is it just referring to the computer-based curriculum, or like, so at the high school, I would imagine that the teachers, there's time for them to work on the curriculum, rewriting the curriculum, because at high school usually we're not using, I don't.
No.
It's not the same as iReady, right? So is there a separate line item for teachers at the high school for them to have curriculum work to, to
Yeah,
revamp
great question.
the
So,
curriculum?
great question. So, for example, this line is all of our curriculum materials and instructional materials that we order. However, separate from that is a professional development line, which curriculum revision or curriculum writing would go into.
Okay.
An example of what we did at the high school this year from that line is we had to order, I believe it was 38 brand new physics textbooks, because we were going to lose our AP status in the physics class because the textbooks were of such an age. So we had the ability to do that and go from there. But when we do curriculum revision, for something that, for example, the 8th grade, the civics piece in 8th grade, that is a separate professional development line item that we have in the budget that is separate from instructional materials.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so we do have a motion. Any further discussion on the motion?
Sure.
Oh, sorry, David.
I want to add to Ms. Byers' comments regarding enrollment and universal full-day kindergarten. One of the most common issues I hear from people in the community who reach out to me is they talk about how they've moved into Whitman or Hanson and they are starting a family and their kid is now reaching the age of preschool or kindergarten, and they weren't aware that the public education here is a tuition-based program. They were under the impression that surrounding communities like Abington, Rockland, Bridgewater, Brockton had a free universal program. And I guess the point I'm trying to make is a lot of parents will have their kids go to another district where they can receive better services, and they are not paying out of pocket compared to here, where it's $3,200 per child for full-day kindergarten alone, not even factoring preschool. So I think that may be not reflective in the NESDEC report, along with COVID, and that may show that those enrollment numbers are lower than they should be. But yeah.
Anyone else? Fred?
As far as structuring, once we've requested a budget, the towns, if I'm not mistaken, can fund something different than what we've asked for on town hall floor and perhaps put things to overrides?
Yeah, I mean, Fred, I think ultimately we ask for the budget, and then it's up to town meeting to give it a thumbs up or thumbs down or what they want to set it as. So I guess, Jeff, just as a question, when you did scenario 3 and you allocated some E&D funds for those Chromebooks, what were your thinking behind it?
I didn't want to, I knew we had an excess in E&D this year. I didn't want to put it in the LEA budget to inflate the LEA budget because it was going to be a one-time cost for June of. The issue that we have with the Chromebooks too, and we thought about the cycle, and we had talked to John about this. I would love to build it up over time, but we don't need Chromebooks every year. The Chromebooks aren't going offline. They're still good. It's the license piece. So I was like, can we get a savings account and I can pull it every year and bank it? And that's kind of what E&D is, and John shot that down. And that's the issue with this, is we have to come up with a way that we can sustain this piece, but we're not repurchasing 225 books every year because we have active books. That's why we talked in subcommittee a little bit about the lease. But I also thought, because we have more E&D than we've ever used and we're not using it to offset the budget, I thought this was a way to purchase those things.
excuse me, I'm sorry, but this large bump, right now, this large bump of the 400 then sets the stage for the cycle
Yes.
to be about 275 a year to keep that continuation going. Because remember, the ECF grant that we received over the summer was that large bump. ESSER 1, which was 292,000, went to that. So we used all of these large one-time pieces in funding to be, and with this hopefully 400,000 from E&D to establish the fact that now we can get on a cycle, which is less. I mean, 275 is nothing to shake, stick at, but so that we can get on this cycle, no matter how we spend the cycle, so that it's renewed at a much lower rate than us coming in 3 years and saying, hey, by the way, can we get 1.2 million to replace Chromebooks? So that's why.
Thank you. And I sat in this room a year ago, and probably the prior year as well. I would like to see us put together all of our needs and ask for all of our needs in a budget, and working with the towns as far as what the cost is. Let's put it on a ballot similar to what we did with the student success budget and let the public decide, but let's make our case and go from there. That's the way I feel we can actually, you know, hopefully get more than just full day K out of something. We make our case and we show our need. I'd like to think that the public will back us.
David? Or sorry, there was someone else.
Someone else? No?
No,
Okay,
go ahead. Go ahead. Or,
Okay, all right, cool. So to talk about come back to me actually, Han, I lost my thought. No, I'm sorry, I'm sorry.
go back.
Jeff, Superintendent, I have a question. The Chromebooks, the licensed Chromebooks, is it a want or a need?
It's a need in FY, for right now, it's a need.
Right.
There's a definite need. Or we don't meet our goal. All right, I lose where we are right now.
Yeah.
Did you have your hand? Or yes?
Yeah, what I would say, right, I would say that this budget is not overinflated. I think we've talked about where our per pupil expense is in comparison to the state of Massachusetts, and we are still in the bottom 5%. So this, you're right, Fred, this doesn't address all our needs, but it's a beginning, and it doesn't even keep up with the state average. It doesn't. I've looked back on one of the initial budget presentation had about our per pupil over 6 years, and I looked at the state average 6 years ago and where it is now. We haven't been even keeping pace with other towns that are funding education over the past 6 years. So this, again, is just treading water. Even though we're adding full-day kindergarten, and thank you, that's what the vote is, to include that. And then the next step is early childhood education, and you've got maybe some space up here at the high school to expand that. You just mentioned that. And that's how we increase enrollment, and that's how we keep those numbers up, and that's how we aim towards our target share, and we begin to receive more state aid back.
Okay. Yes.
And I appreciate what you're saying, Don, but for your amendment, I'm looking at the numbers for the towns, so I mean, I know what we need, and I know, but it's one place that they said it could be a little bit of savings for the towns, so I kind of would like to, I mean, when I'm looking at the percentages of the two towns to give, even though I think we should put out, like Fred said, every single thing we need, I know we wouldn't get it. I want to make sure that, we don't, not that we're overinflating, but to supplement, so are you recommending that we don't take money out of the E&D?
Correct.
That 400? That's
Yes,
what-
I am.
Is that what you?
That's her motion.
That's what the motion is?
You see, that's what.
No, my motion is to set the operating
Yeah, but-
budget.
Make it 400, but is it because, and we're not going to take the 400 out of the E&D? See, that's,
So to maybe, I'm sorry to clear, that number has the $400,000 in it, right, John? That budget line? Well, we didn't do scenario 12. That was just something that you and I put together.
it doesn't have, because you're doing the E&D over and
Yes.
above.
So if scenario 3
Yes.
was for a general fund amount of 58,492, and we're increasing that by 400,000, if I'm understanding correctly, jump in if I got it wrong, what Don's motion is to increase that by the 400,000 and then not take the 400,000 from E&D. Is that Or did I get it wrong?
Right.
Yeah, okay.
But John needs to speak to that,
But it doesn't matter.
because I think that budget line item
Shouldn't
includes the 400 already in the
Right.
budget, correct?
So
John?
so we would still need the 58,492 and then just not using the E&D.
Not use E&D. This would,
Funding, it's not shifting the dollar amount.
yes.
Okay.
So, Don,
It would
you
shift
have
the
to read
assessment.
that.
So the overall budget is the same because in the 58,492, he's using 400,000 of E&D. So if we take the 400,000 of E&D out, it's still 58,492.
Right, the budget.
Gotcha.
So your motion is actually to increase
Okay.
the full budget by 400,000. I don't know if that's what you intend to do.
Okay.
But
That's not what she just said, so that's what I'm saying, because you said you wanted to not use the you increased the budget, but it was because you didn't want to use E&D, but it's already in there.
But,
Because we're paying out of it, the E&D.
but the funding source,
yeah,
So we'd have to walk through all
wouldn't it
this
change
So
the
her motion would
assessment to the
certify
town?
the budget as to what she said. It's how the budget's being paid for.
Yeah, John, why don't you walk us through?
Wait, so some number on here
Hang
would
on,
have to
hang on,
change.
hang on. We're gonna turn to John because John's our expert. I think it's one of the steps change.
Yes.
That's what I'm saying.
The assessment will change.
So the dollar amount would stay the same. It's just the funding source would change. It wouldn't, the $400,000 wouldn't come from E&D. It would be in the budget. So the budget's still the same. It's just we would use less E&D in order to fund it and put more, that $400,000 on the towns in their assessment.
Okay, so the $400,000 would be added to the assessments
Yes.
appropriately? Okay.
But the budget dollar.
The final number would stay the same?
So if,
yeah.
Ms. Byers, amount, should be 58,492, 314 as well, because the budget hasn't changed. If that's what.
Right.
If you want to add
Right.
400,000, despite what we were just talking about, then it should be your motion.
I guess I want to look at a document that shows the E&D.
Yeah, I was going to ask that question.
Thank you, Chris, yeah.
John, which
can-
document?
That's budget one, it's the assumptions for the budget. I don't have it in front of me, but
You know which number it is? What document number?
Oh, I see it in the middle, less use of excess and deficiency.
What are you on?
Yeah, so instead of 523, Don, it would be 123
document number 3.
Yes.
Oh, number 3.
or 1.
At 523, Chris?
So John, if we look at document number 1, do you have that one?
Cherry sheet estimates?
Split between the two towns and change their assessment, but the budget stays.
103.
Oh, wait, that's 23.
I think it's in both.
Oh, they're not even in order.
Okay, so if we go to document number 3,
It's general fund budget assumptions.
Yeah, I know, all of a sudden screwed up. Document 3, okay, it comes after number 24.
Under letter C, excess and deficiency usage in fiscal year '23. And it starts out with 1.868318. So, under the new scenario 3 that we were, you were discussing earlier, it would, the only usage would be $123,885 for paying off the Whitman water bill and the $400,000 for the one-to-one devices. So if the motion would be to not use that $400,000 from that funding source.
That would increase
And
the
instead,
operating budget, though.
increase the operational assessment to the two towns by that $400,000.
Right.
But it wouldn't change the dollar amount of the budget.
Right.
Okay, so I guess
Percentages
then
would
on the scenario sheet, number 3, because it didn't specifically say, using, so those percentages, though, for the two-town operating assessments would change on
the
this
operating
scenario.
assessments and the percentages.
Right,
Yes.
They're gonna be high, you're making them high.
right. Whitman's currently at 4.87, Hanson's at 5.5, but if we're now
Add 400,000 and.
400,000
divide it that way.
at a split. Okay, so that column would change, but the
The bottom.
FY '23 general, I would not. Okay.
Correct.
If you'd like, I have the assessments under your,
So
Okay.
would you want to withdraw the motion and make it the 58,492, and then we can certainly talk about utilization of E&D? Or are you actually looking to increase the budget by $400,000?
No, I'll withdraw that motion.
Okay, you want to do it
And
one
then-
more time?
yeah.
You'll be a pro now. Sorry, they said this is what we have to
It's
read.
practicing, yeah.
And John has the new numbers for us.
Okay. Motion to certify the FY 2023 Whitman-Hanson Regional School District budget at $58,492,314.12 in accordance with the pre-K through 12 Whitman-Hanson Regional School District Regional Agreement, Section 4, E2, and Mass General Law, Chapter 71, Section 16B.
Second. Great. So any discussion, I think we can take it in pieces, right? So we can certainly have a motion on funding sources after the fact, right? But we have the budget. So I know Sean's been waiting patiently. Are there any other questions from the committee? If not, if you have a question on the budget, yes?
Oh, okay, so we'll do with the percentages later?
Yes.
Because I want to hear what John said on his what the new
It
percentage
should be
would
the same.
Well,
No, 'cause we haven't decided.
we haven't decided whether or not we're going to use the E&D, and then that will impact the percentages.
Okay.
So Sean, please, go ahead.
Sure. Yeah, I just wanted to, comment about the budget. And, yeah, just in general. I think for me, the way I'm kind of framing the difficulty of this year is there's obviously a strong incentive to get the things that we need, the full day K and the other things that you guys have discussed. And obviously the students need that. It's very important. I think the towns have recognized that as a priority, and you guys have obviously recognized that as a priority on your own strategic plans. So that's clear. We need to add services. But the tough part is the state is giving us, because of the declining enrollment for an extended period of time, the state is creating a disincentive for growth there. Even for us to propose a level service budget, that would be kind of difficult for the towns. Just a level service budget, because there's obviously a gap between what the state's given us and what we need. You know what I mean? So to add a growth budget, to add services to this budget on top of a situation like that, that's where the tension, I think that's obviously the tension that the towns are feeling, because any growth that you add is coming right on the backs of the town. Unless you go for an override. And I think, I wish Hanson was here to give us more feedback on their budget. Had they given an indication about the override scenario? Because unfortunately what could happen is, despite like the strong advocacy for more resources, if it's thrust into an override situation when it hasn't been planned, it hasn't been promoted and all that kind of stuff, then all of your advocacy could just go for naught, and then we could be stuck. You know what I mean? So I think, thinking this through thoroughly, I think the 5-year plan has prepared a lot of this. Like, how strategically can we add the things that we need for our kids? And how can we do that without creating a risky situation that could undermine where we want to get and the goals that we want to achieve? And it still feels like tension between your board and the towns, and that's unfortunate, because ultimately what we're trying to do is add those critical services for the kids, but having the support of the towns to do so, not button heads, that way. So, like I said, I wish Hanson was here so we could get more feedback about their budget, because obviously the feedback that they gave at the last meeting was not in line with at least the proposed budget, which maybe you're okay with that. I would just say, be careful, because ultimately we could be thrust into a situation that's risky where we could not, just simply do not have any growth. So it's a hard situation. So.
Make a comment. I just have to have a question. I just have a question.
A question for the
Comment,
committee?
a question for Jeff.
Sure.
It's
fire away.
perhaps rhetorical, so I apologize. But in looking at these, I guess my question is, other than full day K, what positions that the students need are we adding from this budget? Not from ESSER, not from E&D. We're adding 7 positions from ESSER. We're adding Chromebooks from E&D. So what are the students getting? What needs of the students in the entire district are we meeting from this budget, other than full day K? So if we take full day K out, what do we have left? That's not level serviced. The two BCBAs?
No, the 2 sub-separate classroom teachers.
Okay.
And we did add some of the interventionists, moving them over from the grants.
Okay.
We
So
did
how many positions would you say?
4 or 5. Adding 2 and then 3 or 4 that we moved over from last year, because I'm looking for those 4 new positions. We added those in from last year.
So we're not adding a music program.
No, we're not adding.
We're not adding
We're-
foreign language in the middle school.
We're keeping what our kids need right now and adding those 2 positions in special education that are critical, or those. So bottom line is, if we don't add those 2 positions, those kids go out of district, and they're a different funding source.
Costs us money, yep.
So, I mean, it's more cost-effective to add the teachers than add the kids out.
Certainly.
Lincoln, thank you for waiting patiently, and thank you for coming.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. So, Lincoln Heineman, the Whitman Town Administrator. So, in the spirit of what you were saying earlier, Mr. Chairman, regarding the full communication from the towns about what our financial situation is, I just want to give a few pieces regarding Scenario 3. Haven't cost out the new amendment because I'm not sure what that precisely would mean for the assessments to each town. But, and I also I'd like to preface everything I say by saying, none of it should be taken as a judgment on the policies. Obviously, the policies and what the educational policy is your folks' decision. Only as the finances and the town finances, since a big part of my job is making sure that the town finances are sound, that we have a balanced budget, and the town services, in addition to the school services, are provided to the town. So I just want to make sure that's clear, regarding the policy is obviously your folks' decision. But regarding Scenario 3, and if there is no reduction in the non-mandated busing assessments, which it sounds like there won't be at this moment, that would mean that under the current proposals that's before the town of Whitman, that the town of Whitman's budget would be out of balance by a little more than $224,000. So $224,584. So I just wanted to make sure that number was clear. Again, in the spirit of what Chair Howard said. I think I won't speak for the town of Hanson, but I know certainly the town administrator of the town of Hanson has said publicly that. So again, as we've spoken about, that's a 4.87% increase in the proposed Whitman assessment. The 5.5% proposed increase to the Hanson assessment, as I think everyone in this room knows, the Hanson town administrator has indicated that she was looking at about a 3% increase that is within their budget. Again, we'll let them speak to that. But I just wanted to clarify that in the context of the conversation about the 2 budgets, the school budget and the town budget, going up similar percentages. And I think everyone in this room knows this again, but I just want to make it crystal clear. If the school budget and the school assessment, or I should say the school budget, goes up by the same percentage that the town budget is going up, the town budget, because the town's budget is such a large part of the school budget, the town's budget, obviously, in this case, is going up 4.87% from the assessment. The 3.8% that the town's budget under the current proposal would be going up, obviously would go up because such a huge portion of the town's budget is the school budget. So I just want to make sure that's clear too, that the 3.8% that I think you mentioned earlier that's no longer operative if we're looking at the assessment that's before you in Scenario 3. So one other piece that I just wanted to mention was 2 other pieces. One is, I think I've talked with this committee before about the Madden report. I think a lot of folks have read it, but just 2 pieces. Again, that's the Madden report on budget that the town of Whitman received from an expert on municipal finance 2.5 years ago. So just to clarify, there's a lot of discussion about the 5%, and specifically the 5% increases that are projected going forward for the Whitman town assessment. So 4.87% under the Scenario 3 now, higher if you adopt the amendment before you. But the 5% going forward that are in your folks' projections in document 16, so fiscal years 24, 25, 26, et cetera, that 5% number, just to be very clear on that, is not discussed in the Madden report. What the Madden report says specifically, and I'll quote it briefly, is saying, since 2015, this is 2015 into fiscal 20, the operating budget has increased annually by 4.86%. Compared, ironically, almost exactly, the what's before you regarding Scenario 3. Compared with the discussion earlier in the report regarding increases in ongoing revenue, these budget increases are not sustainable. And regarding the sustainability and the override possibility that has been mentioned tonight, I just want to sort of reiterate that and briefly quote another piece of the report, which is that it speaks to, even if all of the recommendations in here are implemented, an override is still necessary. So, and specifically, an operating override. It's all these measures defer the inevitable. Even if all recommendations are adopted, an override will most likely be required in fiscal year 2022, albeit a much smaller one. We've avoided that so far. We're talking about fiscal year 2023. We've avoided that through a series of actions. But it's still there. It is there. And so, you know, if, I would argue, you could even argue that for this year under the scenario 3, but certainly under the projections going forward for 5% increases to the assessment in Whitman in fiscal years 24, 25, 26. It is an override, and it would be an override, in my mind, specifically for the schools. There's no other way it's going to work. So I just want to sort of quote those pieces of the Madden report. We've had that conversation before, but I want to reiterate it. And then the final piece regarding, you've had some discussion about excess and deficiency tonight. I just want to reiterate that I hope you do consider, obviously the school committee approved a capital plan, sent it to the towns last week in your vote last week. I just ask that you do put some serious consideration into using that large amount of excess and deficiency. I think it's the second largest amount that schools have ever had. To consider possibly funding the $461,750 in capital expenses at the high school, shared by both towns, and just consider that as a possibility, that one-time revenue, the excess and deficiency, towards that funding. That's certainly how the town would fund it if we have sufficient one-time revenue, free cash. But as I just want to, you know, put that in your folks' minds as a possibility. When you have that excess, and deficiency, that one-time revenue, I think it certainly would be an appropriate thing to consider using it for one-time expenses, specifically at the high schools, so you don't get into the 60%, 40% split. So, and for the final piece, you know, regarding capital, well, I'll come back. We'll talk about that some other time, but thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you. Rosemary?
Hi, I wanted to reflect back on and had some questions about a call that you had with Desi on Hold Harmless.
So, and
we're not talking about homeless.
So, right, we're going to put that on the agenda for April, so I don't
we're not
want
talking
to
about, we're talking about
Okay.
one of the statements made, and it has to do with a number given called target share number, and they stated, if I'm correctly, the target share is a number for the towns. And if that's the target share is a number for the towns, and it says what we can afford. So I want to know if you're using that target plan, that target share number in your plan forward. When you said you have a capital plan, have you incorporated that and have any expectations for the towns to be utilizing that number?
You want to answer that? No, I don't think. I mean, I think we're going to have a conversation on Hold Harmless, but I don't think our 5-year plan has taken into, not that it can't, but I don't think our 5-year plan up to this point has taken into account anything relating to how target share or Hold Harmless would work going forward. So
Yeah, can I just quickly add to that? So when we spoke with Rob O'Donnell over Zoom, we did.
So David,
I know. Just bear with me.
I know, but we're literally doing.
It's relevant to what Ms. Connolly said.
I know, but she also started with we will have a whole meeting on Hold Harmless and the Zoom with Rob.
But it's pertaining to the budget, not Hold Harmless specifically, which is why I want to bring it up.
Sure.
We use Whitman as a specific example when we were talking about the formulas that Desi uses to come up with a calculation. What Rob O'Donnell ended up saying was that the town of Whitman was below target share. So that's all I'm adding. That's all. I'm just saying that Desi says the town has the ability to pay more than they are paying, and they're below target share, and that's that.
And there are DESI reports that support that.
Right, exactly. That's all I'm adding. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, fair enough. Okay, Justin.
Thanks. Justin Evans, Whitman Board of Selectmen, 57 Candlewick Lane. According to the regional agreement and in the opinion of Jay Sullivan, this committee needs to make an annual decision onto whether or not it will fund the non-mandated transportation costs out of the district budget. I don't believe there's been an explicit decision made by the committee yet, and I think it would be pertinent to the budget to either include the costs of non-mandated busing as an operating cost, as is outlined in the agreement, or to decide to include the costs to not fund non-mandated busing within the operating costs and assess the marginal increases to the towns.
So I'm sorry, I don't know what email you're referring to.
So it's not, so in the regional agreement?
I know the regional agreement, and I know it talks about a special operating cost, I believe.
It
Small S.
specifically goes into the apportionment of transportation, and it's almost word by word for what Justin has just said.
Can you say the word by word again?
We need to determine whether or not the non-mandated transportation will be in our operating budget, or if not, we, for lack of a better word, send the cost over to the towns.
And right now, it's in our operating budget. That budget line has all our transportation in it.
Except does it have
What's that?
So-
The number that you have in all these scenarios, no matter what, the bottom line has mandated, eligible and non-eligible transportation.
So it won't be a second line item in the,
That's what we need to discuss with the boards, because it's not supposed to be.
Well, so no, we're talking about two different things. So there's a difference between having a line item and having it on a warrant article. And then also, so that Desi said it's the school committees, and again, this is the conversation we need to have, that it shouldn't be voted separately. They did not say, it needs to be in the operating budget. That's totally different. I know, Justin, I'm trying to pull up the region.
But it's our agreement.
Yeah, I'm trying to pull it up.
Yeah, and so the way that I read the agreement is that if the district chooses to fund non-mandated busing, if the district chooses to fund it, it should be an operating cost within the budget. And if it chooses not to, it would send an article for the additional costs to the towns. But again, I'm an engineer, not a lawyer, so this could be an ongoing conversation.
Okay, so let me
all our numbers have it in the operating budget.
Can I just ask a clarifying question?
Hey, one second. Okay, so I'm just going to read it. So again, we can all have the same information, because I like to all have the same information. So I think this is what you're referring to, Justin. Section 5, transportation of the regional agreement. School transportation shall be provided by the regional school district, and the cost thereof shall be apportioned to the member towns as an operating cost, lower O, lower C. The regional school committee shall determine on an annual basis whether or not non-mandated busing will be paid for by the regional school district. Is that what you're referring to?
That's what I'm referring to.
Which I don't think we've ever done. Or have we voted that every year?
No.
I don't recall ever voting.
It's correct. It's in the operating budget. That is the number that is in here. Both mandated and non-mandated transportation is in the budget number 58,492,314.
Okay.
John assesses is an operational cost, a transportation cost, and a debt cost. Is that correct, John? And that goes to the towns.
Okay. So we can come back to, we probably should vote that, if that's what it says.
Yes.
So, okay. Thank you, Justin.
Thank
Anything
you.
else? No?
Thank you.
Good? Thank you.
Your question?
I guess I don't quite, at the end of the day, that cost is still appropriated to the towns. Okay, just wanted to.
Well,
But is it not if we vote it
That's
within
what
our
I'm saying.
operating
If
budget?
you vote not
guess
to
I'm-
support that, it then goes to the Board of Selectmen.
Right, but if we vote to support it, then the cost is still appropriated to the towns.
That's correct.
Okay, that's all.
Oh, I thought maybe we were
Regional school
responsible.
committee shall determine on an annual basis whether or not non-mandated busing will be paid for by the regional school district. So up to this point, non-mandated busing has been paid for by the towns, correct?
But don't the towns pay?
As a separate line item.
As a separate line.
Because it's not in our operating budget. There's a line
Okay.
for non-mandated busing, yes?
to answer Hillary's question, if it were included in the operating budget, it should be an operating cost appropriated roughly 60/40
Sure.
as with all other operating costs,
Yeah.
which is not what has been done in the past. It's been treated as if the school committee voted not to fund it,
Yes.
and then
Yes.
the cost
Okay.
was sent to the town.
Okay, right.
Wrong for
Yeah.
25 years.
Okay. That's what.
What do you mean wrong?
So
I don't think we voted it.
you never voted it.
I don't think it says it has to be
And,
passed on.
yeah, so there's a disconnect with what's been done and how it's been treated.
Our agreement says if we decide not to provide, then we send it along to the Board of Selectmen.
Right, and they put it, and because we have done it that way before.
That's the way we've been doing it for
What I'm saying is,
years.
I don't think it's, if we're looking at what Whitman pays for non-mandated busing, because we have a lot more kids than Hanson, it shouldn't be a 60/40. It should be separate to each town. I'm sorry, that's just my opinion. I mean, if it's 100-something thousand to Hanson and 300, 400,000 to Whitman, it's because of the busing that has to go. So you shouldn't lump it together in the operating budget and make it a 60/40. I don't agree with that because it's non-mandated. So, I mean, if the mandated stuff, absolutely. But so if it takes a vote that we say we don't support it, even though we do, so that it goes back to the town, as it's been.
Yeah, so we,
It's been a separate line item all this time.
yeah, Beth, and so we keep it clean. How about we get through what are we setting the operating budget as, and then we can come back to, we need to figure out what we're doing with E&D, and then we can come back to
Okay.
the point that Justin just made in terms of what.
And the last thing I'm just going to say is that if the district chooses to go that road and not fund non-mandated busing within the budget, I think that the budget should include the cost if the towns were to vote that down, and then the marginal cost increase to each town should be assessed to the boards of selectmen, sort of following the method that Sean Kane outlined earlier. Because that would be, you would have to prepare as if both towns were to vote that down, and then you're not going to be stuck with a cost should the towns vote it down. But,
Yes, John, sorry.
Thank you. So, two things. One, I just wanted to follow up on a comment that Mr. Heineman made that currently as the, scenario 3 is funded, that Whitman is out of balance by 224, 225 about. I just wanted a quick comment doing the rough math. If you choose not to fund the $400,000 out of E&D and pass that on to the towns, that's another $240,000 that Whitman would be out of balance, bringing the number to 460. I just wanted to throw that out real quick. Secondly, and I know I've talked about this before to everybody, that document 16 to me is the key to this whole budget and the sustainability of the budget. All the inside line items that's up to you. How that should be proportioned and all of that. It's not for me to say anything about any of that. But what I would say is that document 16 again clearly says that this budget is not sustainable. Mr. Stanbrook in next year alone says there's a deficit of $431,000. The following year it jumps up to $700,000, and the year after that it jumps up to $1 million. Now, I'm not privy to all of this information of everybody retiring and what you're doing with ESSER 3 and all of that, but I can't imagine that that's going to impact that sustainability to that amount. I included today an email that I sent out to you, and it was kind of late, and I know that, I'm sorry. But document 15, which has the assumptions of what's used in the 5-year plan. And the 5-year plan, the assumptions for the expenditure increases is 3%. So they're using that as the assumption that each year the expenses will increase 3% across the board. In doing the math and evaluating the last 4 years, which is also on that document 16 sheet, the averages aren't what we've actually done, what we've actually increased over the years are not 3%. It's above that. So that 3% is aggressive. As an estimate to use in your 5-year plan, because your history shows that that's not the case. That's not where you've been. So that 431 for next year, you're using that 3%. That really could be even higher. The 700,000 the year after could be higher. I'm not saying that it will be, but you're using aggressive assumptions based on your history. So I know you need to make the decision and what you think is best for the school, school next year. But please consider the fact that the decision that you make on this budget is going to impact next year's budget and the following year's budget and the following year's budget, as outlined by Mr. Stanbrook down in the bottom of document 16.
Okay. Thank you, John. No, hang on. I want to get through public, and then we gotta make a decision on the budget.
Well, I just want to make a point about it because I'm not seeing.
Randy Lamontina, Selectman, Town of Whitman.
Just give me 1 second.
Liaison representing the Board of Selectmen, through you to Mr. Jones.
So, sorry, Randy, you're clarifying, you're speaking on behalf of the Board of Selectmen?
As liaison, I represent the board, yes.
Okay.
So, to reiterate what Mr. Galvin said, if you go back and look at the projections, I'm assuming that affordability for your budget was determined by this fluid 5-year plan. That there had to be some basis for affordability going into next year, right?
I think I already commented on the
All right.
plan, so.
Like
hopefully
Mr. Galvin just said,
clear.
the closest you come to any of the assumptions is 0.7%. $431,000. That's what you are starting next year in the hole. So how do you build off that? Passing this budget the way it is, you're putting services at risk, whether they be town services or services within the school district itself. And then it compounds. And then the use of E&D. I chaired that committee, the Override Evaluation Committee, and I am not up here advocating against the services you want to add. I've previously said it makes the district so much stronger. How are you going to do it? To force it down everyone's throat and cram it in, you are making this situation volatile, meaning you're going to put teachers at risk if you do this. It's right in your own business manager's documents. $431,000 starting in the hole next year.
Okay, thank you for sharing your thoughts, Randy. Any other comments on, did you have something on the budget?
I just had a comment. So I don't know if everybody has this document. We got it at the Finance Committee meeting last night. And it has the comparisons between the FY22 budget and the FY23 budget. And I think it's important that when we're looking at the budgets, and I think this might have to do with the 5-year plan, and it might be projections, but I don't know. So our minimum local contribution keeps increasing each year because we are not meeting our target share, and that's all I'm going to say about that. I'm just going to point out that the FY23 budget for the minimum local contribution, which is what DESE says the towns have to pay minimally to fund education, and it's not arbitrary, there's documents to support it. So in Whitman, that number has increased by $473,629. And in Hanson, that number has increased by $485,701. That's not something that we on this committee did. That is something out of our control. That number is going to continue to increase until we get to the threshold we need to be at. I don't think the general public, people who aren't sitting on this board or working in schools or working in school finance, I don't think people truly understand what disservice we're putting our students in by not meeting our minimum local contribution and our target share. And I think that that is something that is not part of this conversation, and it needs to be, because when we look at budget increases and the assessments to both towns, almost $500,000 of those increases is not something we are doing. So I just wanted to make that point and clarify that to everybody.
Okay. I had Dawn, and then Fred, and then Randy.
It was said by Town Administrator Lincoln Heineman that if the school budget is put forth, it would cause an override for the schools at town meeting. And I'm not aware of anything in Mass General Law that says when a regional school district sets a budget and sends it to their member towns, that can cause an override. So I would like to know if anyone has anything different in Mass General Law, but when we set the assessment for the needs of the students, what we're charged with, taking care of our staff and our students, this budget policy is most important, and that's what goes to town meeting.
Fred?
The MLC is determined, and it's going to increase, and it's mostly because of the Student Opportunity Act. That's why you see the acceleration you saw the first year of it this year. It's determined by the wealth factor and the property values in our towns. Arbitrary numbers, granted they're real numbers, but they're
taking it from the IRS,
Let him speak, please.
right?
it's actually DOR where they get the numbers. Okay, but if you take that, then you take your foundation budget and you look at the difference in how things are supposed to be backfilled. From what I got out of watching Rob O'Donnell is that we're not coming out of hold harmless unless we can add students. That is the determining factor. It's the declining enrollment that has hit us the hardest as far as why we're not receiving state aid and being able to get out of hold harmless, and we're seeing the swings. Now, if we look at what the MLC is, the minimum local contributions, I think you find that both towns, Whitman and Hanson, both do exceed what they're required to be spending. You know, Whitman to a larger degree than Hanson, but both of them have always spent more than the MLC. Otherwise, I think you can
So
be
I think they're
penalized.
listed as below effort communities.
Well, below effort. Okay, and the effort is based upon target share, which is a number that is consistent upon every school district around. You know, it's just a flat number, so.
And again, we will have, I promise, I know everyone wants to talk about it. We can go through Rob O'Donnell's DESI presentation. We can maybe even have him come and we can spend a night and evening with hold harmless, target share, and all that goes with it. I promise. Randy.
I just wanted to clarify that point, that when it comes to MLC, that I believe Whitman's MLC is about $13 million, and we paid $16 million last year. So we are considerably above it, and I know Hanson is also above their minimum local contribution. As for target share, I think the last time we heard that was probably 3 years ago with Ruth. It seemed to have faded away, and now tonight seems to be coming back. So I don't believe the town has been actually given a exact position where we are relative to that, so I couldn't speak on it. But as far as MLC, where town of Whitman is exceeding that.
Any other discussion on the operating budget of, it's been a while, 58, 492, 314, and 12 cents? Is that, do I get it right, Don?
Yep. Okay, so, so we're just doing that, and then we're gonna discuss.
That is the motion.
about that?
Yep. And then we have a whole bunch of stuff to talk about. We get to talk about E&D, we can talk about funding capital, we can talk about voting transportation. But right now it's just setting the budget.
Okay.
And look, the point with setting the budget, we're at the statutory deadline, at least I think you told me it was Friday, so it's either tonight or we've got to set something tonight. And I'm not advocating this, I'm just saying from a legality standpoint, it can be changed, but we do have to set something. And it does require a vote of at least 6 members.
Important clarification that it can be changed, but once it's certified, we can only lower it and we cannot raise it anymore. So what we certify it tonight is the highest amount we're going to be able to certify it. So we need to keep that in mind, that tonight is the best opportunity for us to have sustainable long-term services for all students who need it. So we can always go back and we can lower the certification, but we can't raise it. So remember that when making a decision tonight.
Can we vote now?
So unless you have something new to add.
That is not correct. Yeah, John Tuffy told you you could raise it 2 years ago at a school committee meeting.
Last year we tried to
found
do
it,
that.
and we couldn't.
Yeah.
I think we looked into it and we found out that we couldn't. We could
Andy
only
Wallach
lower
showed
it.
up.
Yeah.
Maybe this year it'll be different.
Yeah, maybe it's a new thing this year.
All right.
Because I feel like last year it definitely came up, and we went and looked at it, and we're told that. But
Okay, thank you. Any further discussion? Okay, so we'll move to the vote. All those in favor? All those against? Anyone abstain? Okay, so that passes with 6 affirmative, 9-1-0. Okay. So now, before you read that motion, I think, can we have a conversation so we don't have to play musical chairs with the math, if you don't mind? So can we have a conversation about the utilization of E&D? Because rather than doing math and going back and forth, let's just as a committee make a determination. So what we had in front of us was the use of excess and deficiency of $523,885. That's correct. Okay? I believe Ms. Byers' original intent was to reduce that by $400,000.
Yes.
So we can just simply say, here's a motion for what we want to use for E&D, and then we can translate that into the assessments while John does some math for us, depending on what we vote. Is that an organized way to do it? So, someone want to make a motion on what we want to use for E&D in terms of the FY23 budget?
I'll make a motion.
Sure, go ahead.
I move to use $123,885 of E&D towards the FY23 operating budget to fund a water bill settlement.
Okay.
Second.
Discussion. Yes.
I am against that. I would like to see the 400,000. In fact, I was at one point looking at scenario 4 to help alleviate the assessments a little bit with the 200,000 K per year. And in listening tonight, I have gone to 3, but and listening to the town, I would like to keep it as Jeff had suggested with the 400,000. So
Okay.
I would not be voting.
So thank you for sharing that. We'll all have an opportunity to vote. Any other comments from anyone else? David?
Correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Heineman. I think you said our current E&D amount is the second highest it's ever been in this district's history. Am I correct with that number?
So just, yeah, through me. You can
Sorry, through you, Chair.
But
to
I'm not
Mr.
sure,
Heineman,
and I'm
just
not
for
sure, and I'm
clarification.
not sure Mr. Heineman has actually, have you done the research on our E&D?
I looked at the state Division of Local Services today, and I believe it was back, what they have available there at the Massachusetts Municipal Data Bank at the Division of Local Services website. Since 2009, there were a few years after fiscal year 2009 where you had a certification. There was one year where you had a certification at 1.9 something. But so perhaps you had a higher number back before fiscal year 2009, but I don't know.
Thank you.
I don't have
Yeah,
access to
no,
that-
and
I don't have
for the
access
history
to
lesson.
that data.
Thank you for sharing the research.
Thank you, I appreciate it. So, to my original point, so it might have been the second highest amount since 2009, but let me ask you, why is that? It's because year after year, our budget has been cut or suppressed, and we use one-time funding with E&D to help cover that basis so we can continue with level services. Right now, last year, one of my first meetings that we ever had, or that I ever had as a school committee member, our bond rating went down, and the rationale behind it was because we had a low amount of stabilization or E&D available. And to talk about best practices, a common theme we've heard from Board of Selectmen, from Finance Committee, we've discussed it here. It is not a sustainable or a best practice great idea to use one-time funding in our year-to-year operating budget. And that is something we've done in the past. And it's not something that we should be doing anymore. And the reason why our E&D is so high, and I'm assuming, and Jeff, you can correct me if I'm wrong, is because last year we had ESSER and we used $775,000 after we reduced our certification and supplanted it with that instead of E&D. So I want to keep that in mind when we talk about sustainability, longevity. These are the things in the past that have gone on. Our budget in 2019, when I was a senior in high school, we lost 19.2 positions. In 2016, it was even more devastating. So when you talk about longevity, talk about sustainability, it's not just COVID that's gone on over the last decade. It's an opioid epidemic, a great recession, a pandemic. It is beyond just the last fiscal year or two, and we're playing catch up to help get students the services they need, not just for regression, but for everything that's gone on, not just in school, but within our own community that some of our public officials aren't even aware of. So I want people to keep that in mind, that it's not a budget voting on this year, it's playing catch up to make sure that we have sustainable long-term services so all students, no matter what their socioeconomic situation is, no matter where they come from, when they come here, they have the tools they need to succeed. That way they can prosper wherever they go. But when they come here, no matter what their home life is, no matter where they come from, who they are, they have what they need to grow, prosper, and succeed in the Whitman-Hanson Regional School District. And if a budget tonight is presented that doesn't achieve that goal, then I ask you not to vote for it. Because it's not about the town's ability. We let the Board of Selectmen decide what they can afford, but it's our job to say, what do the students need? And then we send it to town hall or town meeting, and we let the community decide what they want. I mean, year after year, in my opinion, and I don't want to go on a tangent too much, but what we've done is we've lowered our certification before we've given the community the opportunity to vote on what they believe is best for their town. And I believe in this scenario, we should be putting forth a budget that is, has long-term sustainability and let the community decide what type of school district they want. And that's it, sorry.
Okay. Fred?
And Mr. Stanbrook, perhaps you can just verify. I know $500,000 of what we have in E&D, I believe, was due to the accounting of healthcare premiums. The balance, we had about $600,000 from last year, is that correct?
I think that's right.
Approximately.
Sounds
So
right.
there's 1.1. Approximately, any idea where the other $600,000 came from?
So it's a lot of stuff from COVID, Fred. Like,
Yep.
you know, when we reduced services, bus, things like that, we ended up with an influx. And that was, and when you talk about one-time money, I hope we don't have to go through that again.
Right, but it's literally one-time money. It's not from, you know, squeezing a budget, et cetera, and having monies left over.
And,
you know,
and
so to
this budget's
speak.
gonna be tight, so.
Well,
It just-
I have an amendment.
Fred, are you done?
Well, I would like to amend them. Is there a motion on the table?
There is a motion on the table to use 123,885 from E&D.
Yep.
And it
I
was
would-
seconded by Dave.
I would like to amend that to include $130,010 to fund the cost of 2 new pickup trucks that have been identified in our capital plan, and $300,000 additional to repair the roadway and parking lots that have been identified in our capital plan.
Okay. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, discussion?
I just think that that would be an appropriate use for the district for one-time monies, their one-time expenses, and we sorely need those vehicles.
Okay. Any other discussion on that? So, I mean, I'm going to say my piece now so I can just kind of move on. So, I don't want to make it more global because otherwise look, at the end of the day, we're going to have utilization of funds one way or another. So whether it's for capital, like Lincoln was asking about, or it's for full day K, whatever it is, the number is the number is. I mean, we can kind of get cute with where we're doing it, but at the end of the day, we're basically taking a sum of E&D, whether it's zero or whatever it is what it is, right? So to me, you know, I was really where Beth was in terms of, I had anticipated, I think full day K is tremendously important. To me, it's one of the most important things. We talked about it since I started. It is tremendously important. And, you know, I'm a business guy. I can't give you the math, but I can look everyone in the eye and say it will absolutely pay for itself over time. Because every one of these kids that are going to half day that can't, that's part of the reason we're seeing some special education cost increases. So I could not be more in favor of full day K, and I know it's difficult, but to me, that's how I feel. Having said that, and bringing this back to the E&D conversation, I, in my mind, had anticipated that we would put some funds towards that over time to lessen the cost to the towns. I think that's going to be too complicated to kind of figure out a long-term plan. So again, everyone, I'm one vote, the rest of you all have your own votes. You know, to me, I'm kind of leaning towards where Beth went, where I think that E&D, I'm back to the 523,000 of E&D in this year's budget, kind of where you had originally put it. You know, whether it's, if we use 523, whether it's pickups or whether it's full day K offset, or at the end of the day, it's 523,000. So that's kind of, I just wanted to share my perspective on where it is. Certainly others can do that as well. And ultimately we have to vote it. So, but we do have a motion to amend. What was your number, Fred?
It was to add $130,010 and $300,000, so $430,010 for those two articles that would otherwise,
Over and above the others, or no?
over and above, adding on to the Whitman water bill. I think that was the only other thing that was on that E&D. On the
No, that
table.
was on the table, right?
Right.
Yeah. Yep. So do we have an exact amount?
So Fred, just to clarify, so you're looking at adding 430 to the 123?
Correct.
Okay.
1 second. I'm too tired to do math, and my Face ID isn't working. Come on, baby. All right, well, you'll have to do it.
I'll do it.
553,
885, right?
no, 895.
Oh, because you added $10.
Yep.
553895. Okay.
You know, back with, you know, this is getting very confusing because I still feel this is a one-time use for the Chromebooks, is a one-time.
Sure.
And
that's what I mean.
It isn't to supplement a salary, it isn't to lower, it is a one-time thing. We know we need the Chromebooks updated and bing, it's done. And then for next year, if we want to put some more there, or we can fit into, you know, the general fund, however we do it. So to me, it's just a one-time use. It's not, and the water bill, one-time use. Done, we're done. And so I feel that those, you know, so you know, I'm back to the original.
We kind of get to the same place.
I guess I'm getting very confused.
We need to vote on the amendment, and then we can
Or can you
make
amend
another
the amendment
We
to
could
add
make-
the 400,000?
To make it,
So right now, we have an amendment to make the utilization of E&D in the FY23 budget $553,895. Right? That's what we have. And it's for offsetting some equipment and for the water bill.
But it will increase the assessments.
Yeah.
What do you mean?
more than-
But it would increase
If
the
you want
assessment.
to withdraw your second, I would add to my amendment $400,000 to be inclusive of the Chromebooks as well.
So 953,885.
Just add 400, so
953.
I'll second that.
but then does that?
All right, so now we have a motion to use.
Now it won't increase the.
Because the
won't
capital,
increase the
the
assessment.
capital items are not in the budget.
No.
Okay, the capital items are separate.
So it'll be withdrawn.
So the assessment on the
The assessment
three
will,
will stay the same.
So,
Assessment
did
will
you
stay-
withdraw, did you withdraw the original 553?
I withdrew the
And who
original
withdrew the second?
553.
Who withdrew the second?
Okay,
I don't even
and
know.
did Beth withdraw her second?
Great.
Yeah.
So you're making a new motion for
New motion to utilize the,
953,895?
exactly, with 400,000 of that to be impacted into the budget, so, you know, to lessen the budget to pay for the Chromebooks.
Okay.
I guess would be the way it would technically have to go.
Discussion. I'm going to go to Steve.
So
first.
the,
Yes, he has
and I appreciate Mr. Small thinking about the town and those two capital costs and getting them sort of off the whole article thing. That's a great idea. I was all for the superintendent's recommendation of scenario 3. I totally understood what Beth said when she spoke up about scenario 4. I thought that was, you know, that gave it some thought to spread something out. That's a one-time.
Yeah.
And it was perfect. But so that we have something that's sort of probably suitable for everyone, I would support what's currently being proposed.
Okay. I think I had, was it Dawn next? Or was it?
Yeah.
Beth? Let's go Dawn.
Good with Don, go.
So I feel this is extremely dangerous, that we're facing a fiscal cliff. And if we have 1.8 million right now, we are by law allowed to have 5%. So we could keep an E&D balance of 2.9 million for emergency. Reducing this down to $1 million puts us in a position to not replenish very much next year. Superintendent said it's very tight. So how will we fund the minimum that George, Assistant Superintendent, mentioned of the Chromebooks required every year for $275,000, as well as, you know, any other capital items? It's, I think it's not a responsible way to put forth a budget that shows the accurate cost of education in our district.
Okay. Other thoughts? Everyone's clear?
We have a point of order.
Oh, yeah, sure.
I just have, Mr. Small's motion is not, those things aren't in the budget right now. So we would either have to go up on the budget amount by his additional costs and vote a new number, or say
So
that that would
we're
be...
no longer voting the budget, we're voting the utilization of E&D. So I don't think
So
the
how
point of order applies, because I think we can vote whatever we want to do with E&D, right?
So it,
Your use of E&D is going to be put into your budget, or that number will increase in your budget.
Maybe two separate votes.
Subtracting the amount of E&D out of your budget for a line, for an item that's not in.
But we're not voting to change all we're saying, right? So right now, I think it's just, here's what we want to use E&D for. We got capital and we got, right.
Don's motion does affect your budget, where
Oh, I see what you're saying. His amendment is the point of order. Okay, thank you. Thank you, guys. Yeah. So
The amendment would have to probably
Fred,
be two separate.
Can we do it this way?
Take the 400,000 out, go back to the original.
Can you just withdraw your amendment? Please?
Okay.
We can do another amendment. But I see what they're saying now, because we're cross-pollinating right now.
So
So can you withdraw your amendment?
it's withdrawn.
Okay, and who had the second? Steve.
I'll withdraw
that. Okay. And before we make any more amendments, can I just suggest this for sanity's sake, right? So we can make a determination for E&D utilization for the operating budget. At any point in time, tonight or subsequently, we can talk about E&D for utilization of capital. That doesn't need to be tonight, and it doesn't need to be right now. And it doesn't mean we can't do it later or we have to do it later. So perhaps we can just stick to getting the E&D utilization as an offset to the funding source for the operating budget right now.
But the motion on the table right now is not in the operating budget, correct, Mr. Stanbrook?
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
It was to
Yeah.
fund
The
the
funding
water bill
source.
in.
To fund the
So
entire
if you go
water
to,
bill is in?
so if you go to document 1, page 1, it shows right now, as presented, its use of excess of deficiency of $523,885. Now, Dawn made the motion to use, I think if I still have it right, 123,885, thereby reducing that by 400,000, which would change the assessments to the towns.
I have a new amendment,
Yes.
right?
Yeah,
Okay, 523 is going back to the original.
Presented,
what number?
523,885.
Yeah,
Okay.
the original scenario 3, using the 400 and the 120.
Okay.
Second.
We have a second. Okay. Any discussion on that? Or I think we may have discussed this one out. Might just be deciding time.
Going back to the
Michelle?
original scenario 3, where 400,000 for Chromebooks and 120.
885.
For the
Water bill.
Yep. Michelle, we're good? No, I can only imagine.
I can't.
Okay.
Can I just ask George a clarifying question about the Chromebooks? How much are they going to cost? So if we take 400,000 out of E&D this year to pay for them, how much are they going to cost next year?
The expected cost for the cycle would be $275,000.
Cycle, that would be next year.
That would begin next year, yes.
Every year, 200.
Every year. The question we have to determine is that through a lease, so it's yearly, or is that like, can we bundle it so that when the next operating life ends of the next Chromebook set, we can get as many more so we can get years on end. But it would be 275 yearly after that.
So I would just request that if we're going to vote to use the 400 out of E&D, that the budget subcommittee clearly, explicitly.
So I'm gonna stop you now because the motion right now is on
Sorry.
amendment. I don't want to start
Okay.
doing motions on top of amendments, on top of motions. We can certainly provide direction, but just let's get through this one first.
Okay.
I'll come right back to you. Any other discussion? Okay, so we're voting on the amendment, which would be the utilization of $523,885. Everyone's clear. Your vote yes is to basically use that amount. Okay, move to the vote. All those in favor? All those opposed? All those abstaining. So 7-3-0. So that passes, Michelle, right? Just a majority vote. Yes? Okay. All right. So now we have an amended motion of utilization of 523,885. So we need to vote the amended motion because the amendment carried. Holy crap.
Good job.
Good job. Get mixed up on that.
All right. So any discussion on that?
Wait, a clarification?
Yes.
What are we voting on exactly?
So now we're voting to
Accept.
use, the motion is to use $523,885, because now it's been amended.
Gotcha.
So now we're voting to use that or not. So a yes vote is we use it, a no vote is we're back to zero. Okay, we'll move to the vote. All those in favor? All those against? All those abstaining? 7-3-0. So that passes. Okay, so we got through E&D as it pertains to the operating budget. Fred, can we do capital? Maybe not necessarily right now if we need to.
I added up the numbers.
I just say, I have a capital committee meeting with Lincoln tomorrow at 5:30 to discuss where they're at with capital. I don't know where Whitman's at with capital right now. So I understand what Mr. Heineman said, but we haven't met. Mr. Jones, Mr. Small, and the capital committee of Whitman has not met yet to discuss capital.
So I didn't forget about you. You had wanted to pass something on to the budget subcommittee.
I did.
Go ahead.
So in us using the 400,000 out of E&D, I think that the budget subcommittee needs to have a clear part in the 5-year plan for the $275,000 for Chromebooks. Like a separate.
I think that's how we presently have it.
Already working on
Yeah,
that.
in the 5-year, yeah.
Explicitly Chromebooks, not.
Yes, we will deal with
grouped in
Pro,
other
yes,
things.
we will deal with-
Like, so it's clear
yes,
that we
we
have
can do
it and it's transparent and all of that stuff.
Okay. So now,
Thank you.
do we want to do the assessments? Yes, we can do the assessments,
Because we
right?
have the use of E&D as in scenario
So
3.
do we, John, do you have those assessments?
It's the same.
It's the same.
Yes.
Nothing
It's,
changes.
yeah,
Scenario three.
Yeah.
So right here.
scenario 3.
We
Yes,
do
as
scenario
written.
three.
Scenario 3 as written, as presented.
Someone want to make that motion? I can give you the wording and the amount.
Yeah.
Yes, Mike?
All right, Mike.
Where it says X, you just have to insert the amount.
Oh, so I thought
Scenario 3.
we were doing.
Is
Okay,
16 million.
It's right here. This one, this is Whitman. And he doesn't need the increase, it just needs the total amount.
Just the total amount.
And this is Hanson, total amount.
Make a motion to certify the FY 2023 Whitman-Hanson Regional School District budget at,
Did you give him the whole budget? I think it's just number 2.
No, number 2, sorry. You're the second vote. We got through number 1, Mike.
all right, so, motion to approve the assessment to the town of Hanson for the FY 2023 budget in accordance with the PK through 12 Whitman-Hanson Regional School District Agreement section is, you're right at $13,341,812.43,
Yes.
which would be a 5.50% increase.
Okay.
Operating budget, operating assessment. Or
Operating.
percentage.
Thank you, Mike, for doing that. Can we get a second?
Second.
Second,
Did you do Whitman?
Did you not hear it, or? So this was 13, for Hanson, 13,341, 812 and 43 cents. So we're basically just tracking down scenario 3. Okay, everyone's good, or at least understands? Yes?
Scenario 3.
John's good with that number.
Yeah.
Right. That's the right number.
Okay. Thank you, John. If we do anything wrong, call it.
He will. He told me he would.
All right.
He'd stop us, right?
Any discussion on this? All right, all those in favor? All those opposed? Abstaining? 910. Michelle, you got it? Okay, now we'll move on to the Whitman assessment, if you are so inclined.
Motion to approve the operating assessment to the town of Whitman for the FY 2023 budget in accordance with the pre-K through 12 Whitman-Hanson Regional School District Agreement and Section. That'd be $16,889,943.66. And that would be 4.87%.
And an increase. Okay, and a second?
second.
You guys get the numbers? Yes?
Right numbers, John? Yes, thank you.
Any additional discussion? Move to the vote. All those in favor? All those against? Abstaining. Okay.
Thank you.
So we have assessment set for now. All right, now I'd like to, since we're voting assessments,
Kindergarten.
and Justin, thanks for bringing this to our attention. So, and I've read this agreement before, but I don't recall the section, so thank you. So Section 5, transportation. Schools' transportation shall be provided by the regional school district, and the cost thereof shall be apportioned to the member towns as an operating cost. Again, those are not capitalized letters. The regional school committee shall determine on an annual basis whether or not non-mandated busing will be paid for by the regional school district. So that's going to be the first thing. If the regional committee decides not to provide non-mandated busing, an article will be present to the selectman's office of each town for approval by the voters. So theoretically, if I'm reading this correctly, there's an opportunity to do two different things. One would be make the determination of cost, and the other one would be make the determination if we no longer wanted to provide non-mandated busing. So we don't have to vote the second part. I'm just, for spirit of transparency, and so you all have what's in front of me, I'm just sharing that. So we don't need a motion if we don't want to provide non-mandated busing, but I do believe we do need a motion per the agreement on an annual basis whether or not non-mandated busing will be paid for by us or the towns. So up to this point, I believe, unless I'm completely losing it, the school committee has not paid that expense and has sent that assessment to the towns.
Is that correct, John?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So I'd be looking for a motion one way or another, however you want to, whoever wants to dive into what you want to do in terms of non-mandated busing and whether it will be paid for by the regional school district or the towns.
I'll make a motion that the non-mandated busing will be paid for by the individual towns.
Okay.
Second.
Okay. Discussion. Justin, since you brought it up, or do you have a...
Yeah, question, and maybe for further research, can we find out what other regional school districts, if they vote this every year, and sort of...
I'm not sure it's relevant. I mean, I think he's made a request, unless someone on the committee, I mean, we can certainly seek legal advice on this. I'm not an attorney either, but when it says the regional school committee shall determine on an annual basis whether or not non-mandated busing will be paid for by the regional school district, to me that's...
Let me clarify, I'm not asking for that to be changed, but more so, like I know Bridgewater Raynham the school district used to charge a fee for their non-mandated, and then they realized families either A, weren't even paying the fee, and then it didn't offset the cost, so they just even stopped doing the fee. So I guess I'm just trying to see what the trend is. You know, we really have been, you know, doing the same thing, and I'm not looking to change it. It's just more information, but...
So I think we will have, I think we already talked about, we'll continue to work on non-mandated busing, what that looks like in budget subcommittee and as the committee as a whole.
Yeah.
This is simply, and it doesn't, I don't think it matters what's in other districts' agreements. This is what's in ours, so we have to do it.
Right, I understand that.
Yeah, is there a cost impact to the towns doing this differently?
If the school district absorbs it?
Either way.
So then we'd be going back probably to our budget, I would assume, because it would now change. Right now, it's not in the budget. But Fred, you had a comment, and then I want to get to Justin.
On the end-of-year report, there is an asterisk, and it does list, say, per your regional agreement, you know, for regions. So it's simply what our regional agreement says. I believe we still have a regional agreement committee that's still active.
It's not active.
Well, and perhaps it needs to, you know, because there are things in there that perhaps need to get cleaned up, and I know we had addressed a lot of that way back when.
Sure. Justin.
Thanks. This vote may be moot because you did just certify a budget that I now understand cannot be increased, that does not include this cost. So, I mean, take with that what you will, but yeah, I think that's it.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, I think, so I appreciate you bringing this up, but to me, I think there would be a much deeper conversation if we were going to change the practice of what we've done for the last
Forever.
1992 plus, right? So I understand the technical request of this is something we need to do. We all need to then vote whether that's something, again, we want to just change. And then I think this is something we can certainly take away and, you know, talk to council. But
also, yeah, just caution that sending this back to the towns now that numbers are being thrown around for what it would cost the district should the towns not fund this, that cost is also not included in your budget.
I'm not sure I followed that. No.
So if either town or both towns chose not to fund the article that would then be sent to the towns, there would be an increased cost to the school district that is not accounted for in your certified budget.
Yeah, and that's part of the conversation we need to have is, again, like the guidance we got from DESE was legally, there is no article. It's a line for the operating assessment, and it's a line for non-mandated busing if that's how we want to do it. But there is no, so it's a thumbs up or down on the entire thing.
But I think.
But we have to have that.
But your clarification right now, what I'm understanding is if it's voted down by both towns, mandated busing is going to be 1.7.
Correct. And
I just heard what you said.
That is a possibility this year.
Okay.
And we'll get more money.
Right.
Yeah, and if it helps, the school committee is now taking a vote not to fund non-mandated busing, which is probably something that should go to
No.
SE.
So I don't think the school committee is taking a vote not to fund non-mandated busing. The school committee is taking a vote on whether it would be paid for by the district.
True. Well, yeah.
Which, by the way, it's been paid for by the towns
Has been
every
paid
year
for the towns
since
at least
1990.
since
Have the towns ever not voted for this line item?
No.
No.
Okay.
Okay.
No, they voted every year. Doesn't even get questioned.
So we're all clear on, again, there's a requirement. Again, I haven't looked at it. I don't know if anyone else caught it. Thank you for bringing it up. We got to follow the requirement. So everyone's clear on what we're voting on? Okay. All those in favor? All those opposed? Unanimous. Great. So the only other thing then is everyone clear on what the non-mandated busing cost is, or do you want to hold off on that?
Yeah.
Is the statutory requirement just for the operating assessment?
John, the statutory requirement is the operating assessment only, correct?
Yeah.
What I'm trying to figure out is should we be voting the non-mandated busing line items or not? Yeah, we might as well. vote. Okay. So we can just look at it based on the documents. We might as well vote them, and then we can
Document number 2.
Yeah, it's document number 2. We might as well vote what they are to send to the towns, and then certainly, again, I think there needs to be some dialogue because learn something new every day. But with this one, I think we want to be clear on how this is being put on the article warrant and go from there. So I'd be looking for a motion.
Okay, motion. For the non-mandated busing for Hanson assessment would be $121,475.
We'll do it separately, Beth. It's
Okay.
fine.
Second.
Great. I got second from David. Any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Abstaining. Okay.
Okay, all right, and for the Whitman assessment of non-mandated busing would be $487,839.
Second.
Any discussion? Great. All those in favor? Opposed? Okay.
9-1, Michelle, you
Got it, Michelle? 9-1? Okay. I think that was everything we needed to vote other than...
School calendar.
Oh, yeah.
So in front of you, you have a calendar that made the adjustment of New Year's Day being observed. So this is the calendar in front of you, but we did get a request by the town of Hanson to amend that and take Tuesday, September 6th off. I did not put it on the calendar. I gave you the one with January 2nd off. This is the calendar I'm proposing after speaking with the Hanson Middle School principal for primaries. He's okay with the amount of traffic for the gubernatorial primary. I think my recommendation is we have school. I get worried about timeout at the end of the year, so.
Well, can I ask a question? Where do they vote in Hanson?
The
It's
gym.
In the gym, right?
In the gym.
So is that the main entrance that we go
No.
in when we vote there?
No, they go in the side entrance. What we've been able to do is really secure that with PD. Just,
So that would be my request.
it's good.
I know that we're
Yep.
worried about traffic, but I'm worried about strangers coming into the
yeah,
building.
there won't be. Yeah, you separate it out. It's fine. It's good. So my recommendation to vote is the calendar in front of you, with the beginning of school being August 31st, and an end date of the last day of school as September 14th.
Motion to accept the 2022-2023 academic school year calendar as presented.
Any discussion? The only thing I would say is after we vote this, can you circle back with Beth?
Yeah, absolutely.
All those in favor?
Hang on. Yes, go ahead.
Unanimous.
I'm not sure, John. What do you?
Okay, all right, okay. All right, yeah, you got something?
The capital assessment to the
Yep.
towns, that wasn't voted.
We
Would you like to vote
voted
that?
last meeting, I believe.
The capital assessment? or-
Capital assessment in the budget,
So,
on page
Where do you
2.
need to go? Where are we, John?
So it's document 2,
Yep.
or is that document 1? I don't remember, yeah, that's document 2. So where you read the numbers for the non-mandated transportation, below that, if a motion would be something like Hanson's total capital assessments will be $481,913.12, and Whitman's capital assessments would be $419,385.41.
I want to see that, grand totals.
Beth, you got them?
Sure?
Thank you.
Okay, a motion for the total Hanson capital assessments would be $481,913.12.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Unanimous, great.
Okay, for the total Whitman capital assessments would be $419,385.41.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Unanimous, great.
you good? Thank you, John.
Thank you.
Thank you, John.
All right, we've now voted everything. Yes. Again, we'll have to have a conversation to make sure that we're all clear on how things are going to line up on warrants and articles, or the article, and make sure that that works. So,
What's our next plan meeting?
and our next plan meeting is April 3rd,
13th.
13th, I think.
the Wednesday before Good Friday or Easter.
I'll be trying to dial in anyways.
Oh, I know what this is.
Other than that, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So
I'll
moved.
move.
Second.
No discussion. All those in favor? Unanimous. Thank you. Good night, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.